Previously, Lyra Nightshade had been seen as nothing more than a weak, ordinary wolf. In front of the entire supernatural court, her fated mate, Alpha Cade Blackthorn, rejected her publicly. But the moment Lyra found the courage to reject him in return, everything began to change. Elena, the woman who had raised her, chose betrayal over loyalty. To protect Cade from political trouble, she cast Lyra out of the pack and left her with nowhere to go. The rejection should have broken her. Instead, it uncovered the truth. Lyra had never been ordinary. She was the final surviving heir of the Silver bloodline, the most feared and powerful werewolf bloodline ever known. Her abilities had been buried for years, until Oracle Vera performed a dangerous ritual to awaken them, a ritual that should have killed her. When Lyra later faced Cade in the arena, she did far more than defeat him. She brought an alpha to submission, she claimed land for rejected wolves, and she forced the supernatural world to change laws that had remained untouched for generations. 6 months passed. During that time, Lyra transformed the borderlands into a sanctuary for hundreds of outcasts. Rejected mates, rogues, and wolves abandoned by traditional packs finally had somewhere safe to belong. Cade spent those same months in therapy, confronting the damage he had caused and trying to become worthy of the mate he had once destroyed. Meanwhile, Lyra became the strongest alpha in the kingdom, but power never comes without consequences. The greater her influence became, the more enemies began watching from the shadows, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. Before continuing, there was one more thing Lyra's story had revealed. Power does not always corrupt a person. Sometimes it simply exposes who they have always been. Oracle Vera had warned her of that truth 6 months earlier. Now, standing in an emergency council chamber surrounded by 12 alphas who had once wanted her dead, Lyra Silverblood was beginning to understand another lesson. Power did not only reveal character, it also attracted enemies you never knew existed. Without warning, the northern wall of the council chamber exploded inward. Ancient stone and mortar tore through the room as smoke and dust swallowed everything in sight. Figures stepped through the shattered opening. They were not werewolves. They were something far more dangerous. Vampires attacking werewolf territory? Alpha Marcus Ironwood gasped, instinctively reaching for weapons he did not have. That's impossible. The treaty was signed 300 years ago by wolves who are long dead. The voice that interrupted him was smooth, cold, and sharp enough to cut. Times change, Alpha. So do alliances. A woman stepped through the debris. She possessed the unnatural beauty of a perfect predator, elegant, precise, and deadly. Her crimson eyes moved slowly across the chamber before settling on Lyra with unmistakable recognition. "Hello, Silver Blood," she purred. "We have been waiting for you to awaken." Lyra's wolf immediately rose to meet the threat. Her enhanced senses flared. But then she felt it. Something was wrong. The abilities that had made her nearly unstoppable 6 months earlier were weakening, flickering inside her like a flame struggling against a violent storm. The vampire's satisfied smile told her it was no accident. "What did you do to me?" Lyra demanded. "We haven't done anything yet," the vampire replied lightly. "But your precious Oracle Vera has been extremely useful in teaching us how silver blood abilities can be suppressed." Her smile widened. "All it requires is the correct poison, and enough time for it to spread through your body." Cold realization settled in Lyra's stomach. She had been poisoned. Her powers were failing while enemies surrounded her, and the alphas in the chamber still resented her authority. For the first time since becoming alpha, Lyra was about to discover whether her people followed her because of her power, or because they truly believed in her. Chapter 1. 6 Months of Peace. 6 months earlier, the borderlands had changed beyond recognition. What had once been a collection of desperate refugee camps was slowly becoming a stable and organized community. Lyra stood on the observation deck of the structure her people had begun calling the Alpha's Tower, a title she had repeatedly asked them to stop using, and watched the territory awaken beneath the early morning light. 543 wolves now called the borderlands home. Rejected mates from across the kingdom, rogues who'd been cast out for crimes as simple as loving the wrong person, outcasts who'd never fit into traditional pack structures. They'd all come seeking sanctuary, and Lyra had welcomed every single one. "You're brooding again," a familiar voice said from behind her. Lyra didn't turn around. She didn't need to. What her enhanced senses told her exactly who had just entered her private space without bothering to knock. "I'm not brooding, Arya. I'm contemplating. You're doing that thing where you stare dramatically into the distance and worry about whether you're doing enough." Arya Moonstone moved to stand beside her, her golden hair catching the sunrise. It's very noble and leadershipy, but also a little exhausting to watch. Despite herself, Lyra smiled. Arya had become one of her closest friends over the past 6 months, and development neither of them would have predicted that night in the tower, when Arya had brought her Celeste's journal. "I got another letter from the Northern Alliance," Lyra said, pulling the folded parchment from her jacket. "They're requesting that I stop accepting wolves from their territories. Said I'm destabilizing their pack structures by offering refuge to their problem members. By problem members, they mean wolves who dared to question their authority." "Exactly." Lyra crumpled the letter in her fist. "Alpha Vincent alone has lost 67 pack members to us in the last 3 months. They're all terrified that I'm building an army. Are you?" The question hung in the air between them. Lyra looked out at her territory again. At the training grounds where rejected wolves were learning to defend themselves. At the council building where democratic decisions were made instead of alpha decrees. At the medical center that treated anyone, regardless of pack affiliation. "I'm building something," she said finally. "I'm just not sure what yet." A knock at the door interrupted them. Commander Hayes stepped in, his grizzled face showing the kind of concern that made Lyra's enhanced senses prickle with warning. "My lady," he said formally, another title she'd tried and failed to discourage. "We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind involving your former pack leader and about 50 wolves requesting asylum." Lyra's heart stopped. "Elena? She's waiting at the southern border with a group from the old Nightshade territory. Says she's formally requesting to join your pack." Hayes paused. "She's also saying that Alpha Cade is planning something big, and she thought you should know." The walk to the southern border gave Lyra too much time to think. 6 months. That's how long it had been since she'd last seen Elena. The woman who had raised her, betrayed her, and then watched from the sidelines as Lyra transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. They'd exchanged a few letters in the intervening months, stiff and formal things that danced around the gaping wound of their broken relationship without ever actually addressing it. And now Elena was here, asking for sanctuary in the territory Lyra had built from nothing. The irony was almost poetic. "You don't have to see her if you're not ready," Arya said quietly, keeping pace beside her. "I can handle the intake interview. Get the information about Cade's plans without you having to." "No." Lyra's voice was firm. "If Elena's here, it's because something scared her badly enough to swallow her pride and come to me for help. I need to know what that is." They reached the border checkpoint, where a temporary camp had been set up for the new arrivals. 50 wolves, some she recognized from her childhood, others who must have joined the Nightshade pack after her exile, stood in small clusters, looking exhausted and frightened. And at the center of them all, looking smaller and more fragile than Lyra remembered, was Elena. Their eyes met across the distance, and Lyra felt something crack in her chest. Not her anger, but that was still there, a constant ember that refused to die, but something else. The part of her that remembered being 5 years old and alone in a cave, terrified and traumatized, until Elena had found her and promised everything would be okay. Elena had broken that promise. But she'd also kept it for 17 years before the breaking. Lyra, Elena whispered as they approached. Then, remembering protocol, she straightened and spoke formally. Alpha Silverblood, I request sanctuary for myself and my people under the Borderlands asylum laws. Granted, Lyra said, the word coming out before she could second-guess it. Commander Hayes will process your intake paperwork and assign temporary housing. But first, you're going to tell me exactly what made you abandon your territory and come here. Elena's relief was visible, but it was quickly replaced by fear. It's Cade. He's been meeting with someone. I don't know who, but they're not Werewolf. The scent is all wrong, and he's been asking questions about you. About your abilities, your weaknesses, she faltered. About what, Elena? About whether there are any suppression spells that could temporarily neutralize Silverblood powers. Elena's voice dropped to barely a whisper, and when I confronted him about it, when I told him I wouldn't help him hurt you again, he said I was no longer useful to him, that the Nightshade territory would be absorbed into his pack, and anyone who objected would be dealt with as rogues. Lyra felt her enhanced abilities flare with protective anger. He threatened your people? He did more than threaten. 3 of our pack members who refused to submit disappeared last week. We found their bodies yesterday, torn apart, and left at our border as a warning. Elena's hands were shaking. Whatever he's planning, Lyra, it's not just about you anymore. He's become something different. Something dangerous. Arya stepped forward, her tactical mind already working through the implications. If Cade's meeting with non-werewolves and asking about suppression magic, he's forming alliances outside our species. That violates at least 4 major supernatural treaties. Unless whoever he's meeting with is already in violation of those treaties, Lyra said slowly. Pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed starting to come together. Elena, you said the scent was wrong. What did it smell like? Elena shuddered. Death. Old death and something sweet underneath, like flowers over decay. Vampires, Commander Hayes growled. That's a vampire scent signature. The world seemed to tilt sideways as Lyra processed this information. Werewolves and vampires had maintained an uneasy peace for 3 centuries, ever since the Treaty of Blood Moon had established clear territorial boundaries and non-interference protocols. If Cade was breaking that treaty, this is bigger than pack politics, she said aloud. If vampires are involved, if they're actively working to suppress Silverblood abilities. She looked at Elena. Did Cade say anything else? Anything about why he's doing this? Elena's expression was agonized. He said that the supernatural world can't afford another Isabella Silverblood, that your grandmother almost destroyed the balance between species with her ambitions, and that letting you grow more powerful would be repeating history's biggest mistake. So he's decided to stop me before I become a threat. He's decided you're already a threat, Elena corrected. The fact that you've built a successful pack of 500 wolves in 6 months, that you've challenged traditional alpha authority and won, that rejected wolves across the kingdom are looking to you as proof that the system can change. She met Lyra's eyes directly. You've done more to destabilize the old order in 6 months than your grandmother managed in decades, and the alphas are terrified. Lyra felt the weight of that truth settle onto her shoulders. She'd been so focused on building her own territory, on creating a safe space for rejected wolves, that she hadn't fully considered how threatening that would appear to those who benefited from the old system. She wasn't just running a sanctuary, she was leading a revolution, whether she'd intended to or not. Get your people settled, she told Elena. We'll talk more later. Right now, I need to. The pain hit without warning. It felt like someone had driven a spike of ice directly into her chest. Lyra gasped, stumbling, her enhanced senses suddenly screaming with wrongness. Her connection to the pack bonds around her flickered like a candle in a storm. The supernatural awareness that let her sense every wolf within miles stuttered and died. Lyra! Arya caught her before she could fall. What's wrong? What's happening? I don't. Lyra tried to speak, but her voice came out strangled. The pain was spreading now, radiating from her chest through her entire body. She could feel her Silverblood abilities trying to fight whatever was attacking them, but it was like trying to hold water in her hands. Oracle Vera materialized beside them, literally materialized, using the old magic that let her travel through shadows when needed. Her ancient face was pale with concern. "Suppression poison," the oracle said grimly, her hands already glowing with diagnostic magic as she examined Lyra. "Someone's been dosing you with gradual amounts over the past several weeks. It's designed to build up slowly in your system, undetectable until it reaches critical mass." "But how?" Commander Hayes demanded. "She hasn't left the territory. Everything she eats and drinks is tested." "It's not in her food or water," Oracle Vera interrupted. "It's in the air itself. Someone has been burning suppression herbs in small amounts around her quarters. The smoke is nearly undetectable, and the effects are cumulative." Her eyes met Lyra's. "You've been breathing it in for weeks, child. Your abilities have been slowly deteriorating without you realizing it." Lyra's mind raced even as her body struggled to function. "Someone in my own pack poisoned me? Or someone with access to your private spaces?" Oracle Vera said carefully. The implications were staggering. Either Lyra had a traitor among the wolves she'd sworn to protect, or her security was so compromised that enemies could enter her personal quarters undetected. Either option meant she wasn't as safe as she'd believed. "How long do I have?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady even as another wave of pain crashed through her. "Before the suppression becomes permanent?" Oracle Vera's expression was grim. 3 days. Maybe 4 if you stop all exposure immediately. After that, your silver blood abilities will be locked away permanently, and you'll be just an ordinary alpha, assuming the poison doesn't kill you outright. "Can you counter it?" "I can slow it, but the full cure requires ingredients from vampire territory. Specifically, midnight lotus that only grows in their sacred gardens. The very gardens that are forbidden to werewolves under the Treaty of Blood Moon." Lyra laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course it does. So either I lose my abilities permanently, or I violate a 300-year-old treaty and risk starting a supernatural war. There might be another option," Elena said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Cade mentioned something about a gathering, a secret meeting of the major supernatural species leaders happening in neutral territory in 3 days. "If the vampires are there, if you could negotiate directly with their council." "That's suicide," Commander Hayes said flatly. "Walking into a gathering of species leaders while her powers are failing? She'd be defenseless. I'd be demonstrating good faith," Lyra countered, her tactical mind already working through possibilities despite the pain. "If vampires are working with Cade to suppress my abilities, it means they see me as a threat. But if I show up asking for diplomatic solutions instead of violent confrontation, you prove you're not your grandmother," Arya finished. "You show them that silver blood power doesn't automatically mean silver blood tyranny." Oracle Vera was shaking her head. "It's too dangerous. In your current condition, you couldn't defend yourself against a determined attack. And there will be alphas at that gathering who would love to see you eliminated. Then I don't go alone." Lyra straightened despite the pain, forcing her voice to carry the authority of an alpha, even as her abilities failed her. "I bring representatives from my pack. I bring witnesses who can testify to what we're building here. And I bring proof that the old system is failing." She looked around at the assembled wolves, her people, refugees and outcasts who had found purpose in her territory. 6 months ago, I stood in an arena and chose mercy over revenge. I'm going to make the same choice now. Whoever is trying to suppress my abilities, whoever is working with Cade to eliminate me as a threat, they're expecting violence. They're expecting me to become the monster they've already decided I am. Her eyes blazed, despite the poison weakening her system. "So we're going to surprise them. We're going to show up at their secret gathering, and we're going to negotiate like civilized beings. And if they refuse..." She smiled, showing teeth. "Then at least we'll know exactly who our enemies are." Chapter 2. The Coalition of Alphas. The emergency council meeting was called for midnight, the traditional hour for pack business that no alpha wanted witnesses to observe. Lyra sat at the head of the circular table in her council chamber, feeling the suppression poison working through her system like slow ice. Her enhanced senses were failing intermittently now, flickering in and out like a damaged light. One moment she could feel every heartbeat in the building, and the next, she was reduced to normal werewolf perception. It was terrifying. And she couldn't let anyone see how terrified she was. 12 alphas had responded to King Aldrich's summons, the most powerful pack leaders in the kingdom, gathered in one room for the first time since Lyra's challenge against Cade 6 months ago. They sat around the table in order of territorial size, each one radiating barely contained hostility. Cade was notably absent. "Let's get this over with," Alpha Marcus Ironwood said, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone who controlled a third of the kingdom's mining resources. "We all know why we're here. The Silverblood situation has gone too far." "The Silverblood situation," Lyra repeated calmly, even though she wanted to show him exactly what a Silverblood could do when provoked. "Is that what we're calling basic civil rights now? We're calling it what it is, destabilization." Alpha Vincent Shadowmere leaned forward, his dark eyes hostile. "You've siphoned off over 300 pack members from our territories in 6 months. Wolves who took oaths of loyalty are breaking those oaths to join your little sanctuary. Wolves who were rejected, abused, or cast out are finding somewhere they're actually valued," Lyra corrected. "If your pack members prefer my territory to yours, perhaps you should examine why that is. Perhaps we should examine whether you're using Silverblood compulsion to steal them." Alpha David Stormclaw interjected. "How do we know these wolves are coming willingly? Your grandmother could command any wolf within her range. Maybe you're doing the same thing." The accusation hung in the air like poison, which, given Lyra's current condition, felt grimly appropriate. "If I could command wolves against their will," she said quietly, "do you really think I'd be sitting here negotiating with you? Or would I have simply taken control of your packs already?" The logic was sound, but it didn't ease the tension in the room. King Aldrich, who had been watching the proceedings with his ancient, calculating eyes, finally spoke. "The accusations of compulsion are serious. I propose we bring in Oracle Vera to test Alpha Silverblood's current abilities. If she's using supernatural coercion, it will be evident." Lyra felt her stomach drop. Oracle Vera could test her abilities and would immediately discover how compromised they were. The poison had her at maybe 40% capacity, and dropping, if the alphas learned she was vulnerable. But refusing the test would only confirm their suspicions. "I have no objection to being tested," she said, meeting the king's eyes and seeing the trap he'd laid. He knew. Somehow, the ancient monarch knew she was poisoned, and he was forcing her to either reveal her weakness or appear guilty of compulsion. "Excellent," King Aldrich said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oracle Vera, if you would." The ancient shaman stepped forward from the shadows where she'd been observing. Her face revealed nothing as she placed her hands on either side of Lyra's head, channeling diagnostic magic that would reveal the truth to everyone watching. The silence stretched as Oracle Vera worked, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. Finally, she stepped back. "Alpha Silverblood shows no signs of using compulsion magic," she announced. "In fact, her pack bonds with the Borderlands wolves are remarkably weak for a Silverblood, barely stronger than a normal alpha's bonds. If anything, she's using less supernatural coercion than most alphas in this room." The relief that flooded through Lyra was short-lived, because she understood what Oracle Vera had just done. By revealing her bonds were weak, the Oracle had explained away the effects of the poison without actually mentioning the poison itself. It was a masterful piece of misdirection, but it also meant admitting she was operating at a fraction of her potential power. "Weak bonds?" Alpha Marcus laughed. "The legendary Silverblood has weak pack bonds? That's either the worst lie I've ever heard, or proof that she's not the threat we thought she was, or proof that I choose to lead through trust rather than supernatural domination." Lyra shot back. "Unlike some alphas in this room, who maintain their authority through fear and compulsion." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as her barb hit home. Every alpha present used some level of supernatural coercion to maintain pack loyalty. It was standard practice, but none of them liked having it stated so baldly. "This is getting us nowhere," Alpha Sarah Moonriver said. She was one of the few female alphas in the kingdom, and one of the few who hadn't openly opposed Lyra's sanctuary. "The real issue isn't whether Silverblood is using compulsion. It's whether we can continue to sustain the current system when rejected wolves have a legitimate alternative." "Exactly," Alpha Vincent snapped. "She's created a competing power structure that undermines traditional pack authority. Every rejected wolf who successfully finds sanctuary in her territory is proof that the old ways are obsolete. Maybe they are obsolete, Lyra said quietly. The room erupted in shouting. Multiple alphas were on their feet, voices overlapping in anger and outrage. King Aldrich let it continue for several moments before raising one hand for silence. Alpha Silverblood. The ancient monarch said carefully. Are you suggesting that the pack system that has governed werewolf society for millennia should be… what? Abolished? Reformed? I'm suggesting, Lyra said, choosing her words carefully while another wave of poison-induced pain rolled through her system, that any system requiring the destruction of innocent wolves to maintain stability is a system worth reconsidering. Innocent? Alpha Marcus scoffed. These are wolves who failed to secure proper mates, who couldn't maintain pack standing, who proved themselves unworthy of Qualdens. They're wolves whose only crime was being inconvenient, Lyra interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. Mates rejected because they weren't politically advantageous. Pack members exiled because they questioned unfair orders. Wolves cast out for crimes as simple as falling in love with someone from a rival pack. She stood, and despite her weakened state, power still radiated from her like heat. You want to know what I'm building in the borderlands? I'm building proof that your system is broken, that wolves can thrive without living in constant fear of rejection and exile. That strength comes from community, not domination. Idealistic nonsense, Alpha David muttered. Is it? Arya spoke up from her position behind Lyra's chair. Because the Borderlands pack has lower violence rates, higher productivity, and better resource management than any traditional pack of comparable size, we've created a functioning economy, a democratic council, and a defensive force that trains every wolf, regardless of their rank. She pulled out a folder thick with documentation and slid it across the table. We expected you to demand proof that our system works, so we brought 6 months of data, crime statistics, economic output, satisfaction surveys, comparative analysis with traditional pack structures. Her smile was sharp. Turns out, wolves who aren't living in fear of arbitrary rejection are actually quite productive. Alpha Marcus grabbed the folder and began leafing through it, his expression growing darker with each page. This can't be accurate. It's verified by 3 independent supernatural auditors, Arya replied. You're welcome to hire your own if you don't trust ours. The atmosphere in the room shifted. This wasn't the emotional plea of a revolutionary. This was hard data demonstrating that the Borderlands experiment was working better than traditional pack structures, which made it even more threatening. So what? Alpha Vincent demanded. So your little sanctuary has good statistics. That doesn't change the fact that you're stealing our pack members and undermining centuries of tradition. I'm not stealing anyone, Lyra said firmly. Under the revised mate bond laws that were established after my challenge, any wolf who is rejected has the legal right to claim sanctuary elsewhere. I'm simply providing that sanctuary. If you don't want to lose pack members, try not rejecting them in the first place. And what about wolves who aren't rejected? Alpha Sarah asked. We've had pack members leave to join you who had perfectly stable positions in their home packs. What's your justification for accepting them? It was a fair question, and Lyra had known it was coming. I accept any wolf who comes to me in good faith and agrees to follow Borderlands law, she said carefully. If a wolf feels unwelcome or unsafe in their home pack, I won't turn them away just because their alpha doesn't want to admit there's a problem. So, you're saying our pack structures are inherently abusive? Alpha Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm saying that any structure that can't retain members without supernatural coercion or threat of violence might have some issues worth examining. The table erupted again, multiple alphas shouting over each other. But underneath the chaos, Lyra's failing enhanced senses caught something else. A whispered conversation between 2 alphas, seated at the far end of the table. Meeting happens in 2 days. Cade promised the Vampire Council. Permanently weakened. We move. Her blood turned to ice. They were talking about the gathering Elena had mentioned, and they were coordinating with Cade's plans. She tried to focus her abilities to hear more clearly, but another wave of suppression poison crashed through her system. The whispers faded into unintelligible noise, and Lyra had to grip the table to stay upright. Oracle Vera was at her side instantly, steadying her with a hand that looked casual but was actually supporting most of her weight. "Perhaps we should table this discussion for now," the ancient shaman said loudly, covering for Lyra's moment of weakness. "It's late, and these are complex issues that require clear heads." "I agree," King Aldrich said, though his eyes were sharp on Lyra's pale face. "We reconvene in 3 days to continue these negotiations. In the meantime, all pacts will maintain current territorial boundaries and honor the asylum laws as written." All of it. It wasn't a solution, but it was a temporary peace. The alphas began filing out, still muttering among themselves, but Lyra noticed that 3 of them, Marcus, Vincent, and David, left together, their body language suggesting conspiracy. When the room had cleared except for her inner circle, Lyra finally allowed herself to sag into her chair. "They're planning something," she said. "Marcus and the others. They were talking about a meeting in 2 days and coordinating with Cade." "The gathering," Elena confirmed from her position near the door. "It has to be." Commander Hayes crossed his arms. "So, we have 2 days to figure out who poisoned you, how to counter the suppression effects, and how to survive a gathering of supernatural leaders who may be actively plotting your assassination. Is that about right? Don't forget discovering which of my own pack members might be working with our enemies," Lyra added bitterly. "The poison had to come from inside my territory." Not necessarily," Oracle Vera said thoughtfully. "The suppression herbs are rare, but not impossible to obtain, and they can be smuggled in various ways, inside gifts, hidden in letters, even woven into clothing that releases the toxins slowly over time." Arya's eyes widened. "The summit delegation 3 weeks ago. The Northern Alliance sent you a traditional ceremonial robe as a gesture of goodwill. You wore it to the territorial negotiations." Lyra's hand went to her chest, where the poison was even now working to destroy her abilities. "The robe. I wore it for hours during the negotiations, and I've kept it in my quarters since then, releasing trace amounts of suppression herbs every time you came near it." Oracle Vera finished. "Clever. Non-lethal amounts that would build up slowly without triggering any immediate alarms. So Cade and his allies have been planning this for weeks," Commander Hayes said. "The poison, the gathering, the coordinated assault on your credibility. This isn't a spontaneous power grab. This is a carefully orchestrated campaign." Lyra felt the weight of it settling onto her already burdened shoulders. She'd known the established alphas resented her success, but she hadn't realized how far they were willing to go to eliminate her. "We need leverage," she said finally. "Something that makes me too valuable to kill, or too dangerous to attack directly. Because right now, I'm a wounded alpha with failing abilities facing coordinated opposition from multiple packs and possibly vampire involvement." "What about the data Arya presented?" Elena suggested. "If the Borderlands model is demonstrably superior to traditional pack structures, that's leverage. Other territories might want to replicate your success, or they might want to destroy it before the idea spreads," Arya countered. "Both," Lyra decided. "We release the data publicly. Not just to the alphas, but to every pack in the kingdom. Let ordinary wolves see proof that there's an alternative to the fear-based hierarchy they've always known." Commander Hayes looked impressed. "You're turning this into a propaganda war. Hearts and minds instead of just territory and power." "I'm giving wolves a choice," Lyra corrected, "and betting that when given the choice between fear and freedom, most will choose freedom." She stood, fighting through the waves of weakness washing over her. "Oracle Vera, you have 2 days to slow this poison enough that I can at least fake full abilities at the gathering." "Commander Hayes, I want a full security review. 2. Every person who's had access to my quarters, every gift received, every visitor logged." "Arya, prepare a public information campaign." "Elena," she paused, looking at the woman who had raised her and betrayed her. "Elena, I need you to contact anyone from the old Nightshade pack who might still have connections to Cade's inner circle. Find out everything you can about his plans for the gathering." Elena nodded, tears shining in her eyes at being trusted with something important. "I won't let you down this time." "I see that you don't," Lyra said quietly. As her council dispersed to their various tasks, Lyra remained in the chamber, staring at the map of territories spread across the table. 6 months ago, She'd had nothing but her newly awakened abilities and a righteous anger at the injustice of the world. Now she had a pack, a territory, enemies who wanted her dead, and abilities that were failing at the worst possible time. But she also had something her grandmother had never had. Wolves who chose to follow her not because they were compelled, but because they believed in what she was building. That would have to be enough, because in 2 days, she would walk into a gathering of enemies with failing powers and nothing but her wits to protect her. And somehow, she would have to convince them all that the silver bloodline was worth preserving instead of destroying. No pressure, she thought grimly. No pressure at all. Chapter 3. The Ancient Prophecy Revealed. Oracle Vera's private chambers were located in the oldest part of Lyra's territory, a cave system that predated werewolf civilization by millennia. The walls were covered in ancient symbols that seemed to shift and move in the flickering torchlight, and the air itself hummed with old magic that made Lyra's compromised abilities resonate painfully. "Drink this," Oracle Vera commanded, handing Lyra a cup filled with something that looked like liquid moonlight and smelled like rotting flowers. Lyra eyed it suspiciously. "What is it?" "Something that will either slow the poison's effects or kill you instantly." The oracle's expression was perfectly serious. "At this point, the odds are about 50-50 either way." "You're joking." "I never joke about potentially fatal medicine." Oracle Vera gestured impatiently. "Drink. We don't have time for you to be precious about this." Lyra drank. The liquid burned going down, and for a terrifying moment, she couldn't breathe. Her vision went white, then black, then exploded into colors that shouldn't exist. When she could finally see again, Oracle Vera was watching her with clinical interest. "Well," the ancient shaman said, "you're not dead. That's encouraging." "I hate you," Lyra gasped. "You'll hate me more in a moment. The antidote has a side effect. It temporarily strips away the mental barriers protecting you from your full heritage memories. Everything your grandmother knew, everything she experienced, everything she suppressed before she died." Oracle Vera's eyes glittered in the torchlight. "It's all about to come flooding back." "Wait, what?" The memories hit like a tidal wave. Isabella Silverblood, standing before the Council of Elders, 25 years old and radiating power that made the ancient wolves bow their heads in submission. "The supernatural world is fracturing," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Vampires encroach on our territories, witches manipulate our pack bonds, humans develop weapons that could destroy us all. If we don't unite under a single banner, we'll be picked off one by one, until our species is nothing but a footnote in history." "And you would be the one to unite us?" an elder asked skeptically. "You, a wolf barely past her first century, would presume to command alphas who have ruled for millennia?" Isabella's smile was sharp as winter moonlight. "I don't presume anything. I simply state facts. I am the strongest, the fastest, the most powerful werewolf born in 300 years. You can either accept my leadership willingly, or I can demonstrate why resistance is futile." The memory shifted, blurring into another scene. Isabella in combat with an alpha who had refused her authority. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, the alpha was dead, and Isabella was barely breathing hard. "Does anyone else wish to contest my right to lead?" she asked the assembled packs. Silence. Terrified. Absolute silence. Another memory. This one tinged with something that might have been regret. Isabella holding an infant, Lyra's mother, and staring down at the tiny face with an expression that mixed love with calculation. "You will be greater than I am," Isabella whispered to the baby. "I will make you into a weapon so perfect that no one will dare challenge our bloodline again." The memories came faster now, a lifetime of ambition and power and slowly growing paranoia compressed into seconds of overwhelming sensation. Isabella discovering the prophecy in ancient texts that no one had read in centuries. When the moon bleeds silver and the rejected rise, the last Silverblood will stand at the crossroads of annihilation and salvation. She will wield power enough to unite or destroy, to save or damn, to become the savior or the tyrant. Her choice will determine whether the supernatural world endures or falls into eternal darkness. Isabella's hands trembling as she read the words again and again. trying to understand their meaning. A choice, she murmured. Not a destiny, not a predetermined outcome. A choice. But which choice was the right one? The final memory was the worst. Isabella's last moments, surrounded by enemies who had finally gathered enough courage to move against her. Please, she gasped, bleeding from a dozen mortal wounds while her 5-year-old granddaughter hid in the cave behind her. The prophecy, you don't understand. One of my bloodline has to survive, has to be there when the darkness comes. If you kill us all, then the supernatural world will be free of silverblood tyranny. Alpha Marcus Ironwood's grandfather said coldly. He was younger then, but his eyes held the same calculating cruelty. Your ambition nearly destroyed us all, Isabella. We won't risk your granddaughter repeating your mistakes. She's 5 years old, Isabella pleaded, showing vulnerability for perhaps the first time in her life. She's innocent. She doesn't even know what she is yet. Then she'll die innocent, one of the other alphas said. Better that than letting another silverblood live to threaten us. Isabella's last act was to channel every remaining ounce of her power into the cave behind her, creating a barrier so strong that even a dozen alphas together couldn't break it. The spell would hold for 3 days, long enough for someone to find the child and save her, or long enough for the child to die alone in the dark. I'm sorry, Isabella whispered with her last breath. Not to the alphas surrounding her, but to the granddaughter she would never see grow up. I wanted to leave you a better world. Instead, I'm leaving you this nightmare. If you survive, if you live long enough to understand, please make better choices than I did. Lyra came back to herself, gasping, tears streaming down her face. Oracle Vera was holding her shoulders, keeping her grounded in the present. Breathe, the ancient shaman commanded. You're here, you're safe. The memories can't hurt you. She knew, Lyra choked out. My grandmother knew there was a prophecy, knew that one of her bloodline would have to make some kind of choice that would determine the fate of the entire supernatural world. And she still became a tyrant, Oracle Vera finished quietly. Yes, because Isabella Silverblood believed that the only way to save the supernatural world was to control it absolutely. She couldn't conceive of any other path, and the alphas killed her for it. Lyra wiped her eyes roughly. They murdered her and tried to murder me because they were terrified of what a Silverblood could become. Can you blame them? Oracle Vera's voice was gentle but firm. Your grandmother was powerful beyond measure, and she used that power to dominate every pack within her reach. She believed she was saving werewolves, but from the outside, she looked like a conqueror building an empire. But the prophecy, Lyra said, struggling to process everything she'd just experienced. It mentioned darkness. Some kind of threat that would require a Silverblood to face. Do you know what it was referring to? Oracle Vera was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. The vampires have their own prophecy, she said finally. One that speaks of a blood moon rising when the supernatural world is at its weakest. When that moon rises, the first vampire, the progenitor of their entire species, sealed away for millennia, will break free of his prison. Lyra felt ice settle into her stomach. And he will consume everything. Werewolf, witch, human, it won't matter. The first vampire is hunger given form, power without conscience. When he was sealed away 3,000 years ago, it took the combined might of every supernatural species working together to imprison him. Oracle Vera's ancient eyes met Lyra's. Your grandmother discovered references to his potential return. That's part of why she was so desperate to unite the werewolf packs. She believed that when the first vampire rose again, only a unified supernatural world would have any chance of stopping him. But instead of explaining that, she just tried to conquer everyone. She tried, she failed, and in failing, she made it nearly impossible for any Silverblood who came after her to be trusted with leadership. Oracle Vera's expression was grim. Which brings us to you, standing at the exact crossroads the prophecy predicted. The supernatural world is fracturing, vampires breaking treaties, werewolf packs fighting among themselves, witches retreating into isolation, and somewhere, in some sealed prison that we don't fully understand, the first vampire is growing stronger. Lyra's mind was racing. The gathering in 2 days, Cade's alliance with vampires, the coordinated effort to suppress my abilities. She looked up sharply. They know. The vampires know the first vampire is close to breaking free, and they're trying to prevent any unified resistance. Or they're trying to ensure that when he rises, werewolves are too weak and divided to oppose him effectively. Oracle Vera agreed, which amounts to the same thing, the end of werewolf society as we know it. Why would vampires want that? Wouldn't the first vampire threaten them too? Some vampire factions believe they can control him. Others think they can appease him by offering him other species as tribute. The oracle's voice was heavy with disgust. And some simply want to watch the world burn. Vampires are not a unified species any more than we are. They have their own internal conflicts, their own power struggles. Lyra stood and began pacing, her tactical mind working through the implications, even as the suppression poison continued its slow work through her system. So, let me see if I understand this correctly. I'm prophesied to stand at a crossroads where my choices will determine whether the supernatural world survives or falls into darkness. My grandmother tried to prevent the apocalypse through tyranny, and failed. The first vampire is close to breaking free of his prison. Vampires are working with werewolf alphas to keep me weak and divided, and I have approximately 2 days to figure out how to unite supernatural species that have spent centuries learning to hate and fear each other. That's remarkably accurate, yes, Oracle Vera said. And just to make things interesting, I'm currently poisoned, my abilities are failing, and half the alpha community wants me dead. Also accurate. Lyra laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria to it. This is insane. I'm 23 years old. 6 months ago, I was a nobody rogue with no pack and no future. Now I'm supposed to save the entire supernatural world from an ancient vampire apocalypse? The prophecy doesn't care about your age or your preparations, Oracle Vera said. It only cares about your choices, and right now, you're standing at the first major choice point, which is the gathering in 2 days. You can go and try to negotiate peace, revealing your weakness and hoping that diplomacy will work, or you can stay here, consolidate your power, and prepare for war against enemies who are already moving against you. Oracle Vera's eyes glittered in the torchlight. One path risks everything on the chance that supernatural leaders will choose cooperation over conflict. The other path accepts that conflict is inevitable and prepares accordingly. My grandmother would choose war, Lyra said slowly. Your grandmother did choose war. And it got her killed while accomplishing nothing except making every other species more paranoid and hostile. Oracle Vera stepped closer. But you're not your grandmother, Lyra. That's the entire point of the prophecy. You have the chance to make different choices. Better choices. Or worse ones, Lyra muttered. What if I'm wrong? What if I go to this gathering and try to build bridges, and all I do is get myself killed and leave the supernatural world with no silver blood to face the first vampire when he rises? Then you'll have failed spectacularly, and doomed us all, Oracle Vera said with brutal honesty. But at least you'll have failed while trying to be better than the tyrant who came before you. It was, Lyra reflected, possibly the worst motivational speech she'd ever heard. And yet, somehow, it helped. Tell me about the gathering, she said finally. Who will be there? What are the power dynamics? What leverage do I actually have? Oracle Vera pulled out a worn leather journal and opened it to a page covered in names and notes. The gathering is being held at the crossroads, neutral territory that belongs to no single species. Every major supernatural faction will send representatives. For vampires, it will be Lady Seraphina Nightborn and her council of elders. For witches, the Coven of Three Moons. For werewolves, King Aldrich, and whichever alphas he chooses to bring. And they're all going to be discussing what? Exactly? How to prevent the apocalypse. They're going to be discussing how to maintain the current power balance while the world slowly tears itself apart, Oracle Vera corrected. None of them want to acknowledge the first vampire threat, because acknowledging it would require cooperation and sacrifice. It's easier to pretend the danger doesn't exist, and keep fighting over territorial scraps. So I show up and what? Announce that an ancient vampire apocalypse is coming and they should all work together. You show up and prove that cooperation is possible, that werewolves can build something better than fear-based hierarchy. that rejected wolves and outcasts can create a thriving society. Oracle Vera's voice grew more intense. You show them the data Arya compiled. You demonstrate that the Borderlands model works. And you offer them a choice. Continue with the old system, and watch it collapse under its own contradictions. Or try something new. That's assuming they don't just kill me the moment I walk in. There are rules at the crossroads. Ancient laws that even vampire elders respect. No violence is permitted on neutral ground. And any faction that breaks that law faces sanction from all other factions. Oracle Vera paused. Of course, that only protects you during the actual gathering. Before and after. She shrugged eloquently. So, I need to survive getting there, survive the gathering itself, and survive leaving, all while poisoned and with failing abilities. I did mention this was the crossroads of the prophecy, didn't I? Oracle Vera's smile was grim. No one promised it would be easy. Lyra looked down at her hands, ordinary-looking hands that supposedly held the power to save or doom the supernatural world. She thought about her grandmother, driven by the best intentions into becoming a tyrant. She thought about the 500 wolves in her territory who had trusted her to build something better. She thought about the first vampire, growing stronger in some ancient prison, waiting for the moment when supernatural divisions would be too deep to resist his return. And she thought about Cade, her rejected mate who was now working with vampires to ensure she never became powerful enough to challenge anyone. I need to see him, she said suddenly. Oracle Vera raised an eyebrow. See who? Cade. Before the gathering. I need to understand why he's doing this, why he's willing to betray his own species to keep me powerless. Lyra met the Oracle's eyes. Because if I'm going to convince a room full of supernatural leaders to work together, I need to start by understanding why my own mate is working so hard to destroy me. That's either very wise or very foolish, Oracle Vera observed. Probably both. Lyra agreed. But it's the choice I'm making. Can you arrange a meeting? The ancient shaman was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I can get word to him. Whether he agrees to meet is another question. He'll meet. Lyra said with certainty she didn't entirely feel. The mate bond is still there, even if we've both spent 6 months pretending it isn't. He'll come. And if he comes planning to finish what the poison started? Lyra smiled, and there was something of her grandmother's dangerous edge in the expression. Then I guess we'll find out if I'm really as weak as everyone thinks I am. Chapter 4. Cade's Redemption Arc. The meeting place was a clearing on the border between Lyra's territory and Cade's, neutral ground, where neither could claim the advantage of home territory. Lyra arrived an hour before dawn with only Commander Hayes as backup, though she knew Oracle Vera was watching from the shadows with enough old magic ready to level the entire forest if necessary. The suppression poison was worse today. Her enhanced senses flickered in and out like a dying flame, and the constant pain had become a dull companion she'd almost grown used to. Almost. Cade emerged from the tree line exactly on time, alone as she'd requested. In the pre-dawn darkness, his storm-gray eyes seemed to glow with their own light. The mate bond flared between them, weakened by months of denial and her current condition, but still present. Still pulling at something deep in her chest that she'd tried very hard to ignore. He looked different. Thinner, perhaps. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. And when their eyes met across the clearing, she saw something in his expression that she'd never seen before. Regret. Lyra, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You look poisoned? She finished. Yes, well, that tends to happen when someone's been systematically dosing you with suppression herbs for weeks. Funny thing about that, the toxin signature matches the rare strain that only grows in 3 locations, one of which happens to be in your territory. Cade's face went pale. You think I poisoned you? I think someone with access to rare suppression herbs and significant motivation to see me weakened poisoned me. You check both boxes. Lyra kept her voice level despite the way her heart was hammering. But I also think that if you actually wanted me dead, I'd be dead. So either you're incompetent at assassination, or you're not the one who ordered it. I didn't. Cade took a step forward, then stopped himself. I swear on the moon goddess herself, I had nothing to do with poisoning you. Then why are you meeting with vampires? Lyra demanded. Why are you coordinating with alphas who openly want me eliminated? Why are you working so hard to ensure I fail? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with 6 months of unresolved history. Cade was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as if he was physically fighting to get the words out. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm terrified of you. Of all the answers Lyra had expected, that wasn't one of them. You're… what? Terrified, Cade repeated, louder now. Of you. Of what you are. Of what you make me feel. Of what it means that the moon goddess chose you, someone so fundamentally good and decent, to be mated to someone as broken as me. He moved closer, and Lyra could see the raw emotion in his eyes now. 6 months ago, I rejected you because I couldn't handle the intensity of the bond. Because every instinct I had was screaming at me to submit to you, to trust you, to be vulnerable in ways I'd spent my entire life learning to avoid. His voice cracked. I told myself it was because you weren't suitable. That you weren't strong enough, weren't powerful enough, weren't alpha material. And then I became exactly what you feared most, Lyra said quietly. You became everything I'd convinced myself was impossible. Cade's hands clenched into fists at his sides. A powerful alpha who leads through trust instead of fear. Someone who builds instead of dominates. Who shows mercy without being weak. Who makes wolves want to follow her not because they're compelled, but because they believe in her. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know what it's like? Watching you build something genuine while I maintain my pack through supernatural coercion and inherited authority? Do you know how it feels to realize that everything I was taught about leadership and power was wrong, and the proof is standing right there in your territory, thriving without me? Then why fight it? Lyra asked. Why work with vampires and conspirators to tear down what I'm building? If you see that it works, if you understand that there's a better way, because I'm a coward, Cade said flatly. Because it's easier to destroy what you've built than to admit I've wasted 30 years of my life being exactly the kind of alpha that makes rejected wolves need sanctuaries in the first place. The admission seemed to cost him something. He sank down onto a fallen log, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. The vampires approached me 3 months ago, he said quietly. Lady Seraphina herself. She said she had information about a prophecy, about a threat that required all supernatural species to work together to prevent. She said the key was ensuring that werewolves didn't fall under the control of another Isabella Silverblood. She convinced you I was becoming my grandmother, Lyra said. She showed me what your grandmother did, the packs she destroyed, the alphas she killed, the wolves who died resisting her tyranny. Cade's voice was hollow. And then she showed me your territory. 500 wolves in 6 months. Democratic councils and reformed pack bonds and all these changes happening so fast. She said history was repeating itself, that you'd start with noble intentions and end as a tyrant just like Isabella did. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, Cade corrected. Because if you were becoming a tyrant, then I was justified in rejecting you. If your system was doomed to fail, then I didn't have to face the fact that mine is already failing. He looked up at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. But I've been watching you, Lyra. Really watching. And nothing you've done looks like tyranny. It looks like hope. Like genuine change. Like everything I'm supposed to be as an alpha but never learned how to become. Lyra felt her anger warring with something else. Something that might have been understanding. Or perhaps just exhaustion from carrying rage for 6 months. So, why keep working with them? She asked. If you realized the vampires were manipulating you, why continue coordinating with alphas who want me dead? Because I'm in too deep to back out safely. Cade's voice turned bitter. I made deals, Lyra. Promised things. The vampires have information about my pack. Axe secrets that could destroy me if they were made public. And the Alpha Coalition? They see me as their inside man. Someone with intimate knowledge of you because of our mate bond. If I try to withdraw now, I become a liability to both sides. He stood and moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body despite the cool pre-dawn air. I didn't order the poisoning. I swear that to you, but I know who did. His voice dropped even lower. Alpha Marcus Ironwood has been making deals with a vampire faction that wants to ensure the supernatural world remains divided. They believe that a unified werewolf nation under Silverblood leadership would threaten vampire territory claims, so they're working to eliminate you before you can grow strong enough to challenge them. And the gathering in 2 days? Is a trap, Cade said bluntly. Multiple factions planning to move against you simultaneously. The neutral ground laws will protect you during the meeting itself, but getting there and leaving afterward. He shook his head. They've planned ambush points along every likely route. Even with your full abilities, it would be dangerous. In your current poisoned state, it's suicide. Lyra felt the weight of prophecy pressing down on her shoulders. Oracle Vera had been right. This was the crossroads. She could stay in her territory and try to weather whatever was coming, or she could walk into the trap and attempt to change the game entirely. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "If you're in too deep to back out, why warn me about the ambush?" Cade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. The mate bond flared between them, and Lyra felt her weakened abilities resonate with his alpha power in ways that made her breath catch. "Because 6 months of therapy and self-reflection has taught me something important," he said quietly. "I can choose to be better. I can choose to stop being the coward who destroys things because he's afraid of change. I can choose to be worthy of the mate the moon goddess gave me, even if that mate can never forgive me for what I've done." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Lyra. I know I don't deserve it, but I am asking for a chance to help you survive what's coming. Let me be the inside man for your side instead of theirs. Let me feed you information about their plans, their movements, their weaknesses." "Why should I trust you?" Lyra asked, even as part of her desperately wanted to. "Because the mate bond is still there," Cade said simply. "You can feel it as clearly as I can. And mate bonds don't lie about fundamental character. Yes, I'm broken and scared, and have spent most of my life making terrible choices. But I'm not evil, Lyra. I'm just lost. And you're the first wolf in my entire life who's made me think I could find my way to something better." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words resonating through the bond. He was telling the truth. Or at least, the truth as he understood it. That didn't mean she could trust him completely, but it meant he was offering her something valuable. Information from inside the enemy coalition. "Tell me everything," she said finally. "Every detail about the gathering, the ambush plans, the factions involved. And then we'll see if you're serious about choosing to be better." Relief flooded Cade's face. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," Lyra interrupted. "Because if this is another manipulation, if you're playing me to get closer so you can finish what the poison started, I promise you won't live long enough to regret it." "Fair enough." Cade pulled out a leather folder thick with documents. "I've been keeping records. Everything I know about the vampire factions, the alpha conspirators, their plans for the gathering. It's all here." As he began explaining the contents, Lyra's tactical mind started working through implications and possibilities. The trap was complex, multiple layers of deception designed to ensure she couldn't escape even if she figured out one level of the conspiracy. But knowing it was a trap changed everything. "The ambush happens on the Western Road," Cade was saying, pointing to a map. "They're expecting you to take the most direct route, traveling in daylight with maximum security. 20 wolves waiting in concealment, coordinated with vampire scouts to track your movements." "What about the Eastern Pass?" Lyra asked. "Considered too dangerous because of the cliff roads. They're assuming you won't risk it, especially not in your weakened condition." Cade looked up. "But if you traveled at night, with a small fast group instead of a large slow convoy, we could bypass the ambush entirely," Lyra finished. "Get to the crossroads before they even realize we're coming. It's risky. The Eastern Pass is treacherous even in good conditions. And walking into a coordinated ambush isn't risky?" Lyra smiled grimly. "Besides, I've spent 6 months building a pack of wolves who were told they weren't good enough. Turns out, rejected wolves are excellent at doing things people assume they can't." Cade studied her face in the growing dawn light. "You're actually going to the gathering. Even knowing it's a trap, even poisoned and weakened, you're still going." "I don't have a choice," Lyra said quietly. "There's a prophecy, Cade. An ancient one about a silver blood standing at a crossroads that determines whether the supernatural world survives or falls into darkness, and I'm pretty sure the gathering is that crossroads. She explained what Oracle Vera had told her about the first vampire, about her grandmother's failed attempt to unite the supernatural world, about the choice she had to make between following Isabella's tyrannical path or trying something new. Cade listened in growing horror. The first vampire is real? I thought that was just a myth vampires used to scare their children. Apparently not. And apparently, some vampire factions are actively working to ensure the supernatural world is too divided to resist when he breaks free. Lyra's voice hardened. Which makes every alpha and vampire working to keep me weak and isolated, a collaborator in species-wide suicide. They don't know, Cade said urgently. The alpha's working with Marcus. They think this is just about maintaining traditional power structures. They have no idea about the first vampire threat. Then, I need to make them understand at the gathering. Lyra squared her shoulders despite the pain coursing through her system. I need to prove that cooperation is possible, that my model works, that we can build something better than fear-based hierarchy. And I need to do it while poisoned, surrounded by enemies, with a mate who spent 6 months trying to destroy me. She looked at Cade directly. So here's the real question. Are you actually willing to help? Or are you just trying to salve your conscience before you go back to the conspirators and report everything I just told you? The mate bond thrummed between them as Cade met her eyes. She could feel his turmoil, his desire to be better warring with a lifetime of choosing the safe, self-protective path. I'll help, he said finally. But I need something from you in return. What? Take me with you to the gathering. Let me stand beside you when you make your case. Let me publicly repudiate the Alpha Coalition and declare my support for the Borderlands model. His voice grew stronger. Let me prove I'm choosing to change, not just saying the words. Lyra's first instinct was to refuse. Trusting Cade with information was one thing. Walking into a hostile gathering with him at her side was something else entirely. But as she looked at him, feeling the mate bond's honest resonance, she realized something important. If she wanted supernatural leaders to believe cooperation was possible, she needed to demonstrate it. And what better demonstration than a rejected mate and rejecting Alpha standing together instead of destroying each other? One condition, she said. You stop working with the conspirators immediately. No more meetings, no more coordination, no more playing both sides. If you're with me, you're all the way with me. Agreed. Cade's response was immediate. And you agree to my pack laws. While you're in my territory, you follow my rules, including the prohibition on using supernatural coercion to maintain authority. He flinched at that but nodded. Agreed. And if you betray me again? Lyra's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I will make what I did to you in the arena 6 months ago look like a mercy. Understand? Understood. Cade's storm-gray eyes were steady on hers. I won't betray you, Lyra. Not again. I swear it on the mate bond itself. The vow resonated through their connection with the weight of sacred oath. Whatever else Cade was, he wasn't lying about this commitment. Then we have a deal, Lyra said. We leave for the crossroads tomorrow at sunset. Small group. Fast movement. Eastern Pass route. You, me, Arya, Commander Hayes, and Oracle Vera. The Alpha Coalition will realize I've switched sides the moment I don't show up for the ambush coordination meeting tonight. Good. Lyra's smile was sharp. Let them scramble to adjust their plans at the last minute. Chaos is an advantage when you're already outmatched. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the clearing in shades of gold and amber, Lyra felt something shift, not just in her relationship with Cade, but in the larger pattern of events swirling around her. She was still poisoned, still facing coordinated enemies on multiple fronts, still standing at a prophetic crossroads with the fate of the supernatural world hanging in the balance. But now, she had information, she had a strategy, and she had an ally where she'd previously had an enemy. It wasn't much, but it was more than her grandmother had ever had. One more thing, Cade said as they prepared to part ways. The vampire who approached me, Lady Seraphina. She mentioned something strange during our last meeting. She said that the first vampire's prison is beginning to crack, and that the only thing strong enough to repair it is Is what? Lyra prompted when he trailed off. The combined power of a perfectly bonded alpha pair, channeling old magic through a complete mate connection. Cade's voice was quiet. She said, "Your grandmother never achieved it because she rejected genuine emotional bonds in favor of domination. But if two alphas who were true mates could actually complete their bond without rejection or coercion." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lyra understood the implication perfectly. The prophecy wasn't just about her choice between tyranny and cooperation. It was about whether she could achieve what her grandmother never had, a genuine connection strong enough to channel the kind of power needed to save the supernatural world. And the only wolf capable of forming that bond with her was standing right in front of her, asking for a chance to be worthy of it. "No pressure," she said, echoing her thought from days ago. Cade's smile was tentative but genuine. No pressure at all. As they parted ways to prepare for the journey ahead, Lyra felt the mate bond settle into something more stable than it had been in months. Not healed. They were nowhere near healed. But maybe, possibly, beginning to move in that direction, which was good, because if Oracle Vera was right about what they'd need to face the first vampire, she and Cade were going to need every bit of connection they could manage. The gathering was in 36 hours. The ambush would fail. The conspirators would be thrown into confusion, and Lyra would walk into a room full of supernatural leaders with a plan that was either brilliantly audacious or completely insane. Possibly both, but at least she wouldn't be walking in alone. Chapter 5. The Betrayal from Within. The War Council meeting began at noon, 30 hours before they were scheduled to leave for the crossroads. Lyra had assembled her inner circle in the secure chamber beneath her tower, a room warded with enough old magic to prevent any supernatural eavesdropping. Around the table sat Arya, Commander Hayes, Oracle Vera, Elena, and now Cade, whose presence had caused raised eyebrows but no direct objections. "Yet, let me make sure I understand this correctly," Arya said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger as she stared at Cade. "You've spent 6 months working with vampires and alpha conspirators to undermine everything we've built here. You've been complicit in plans to assassinate Lyra, and now we're just supposed to trust you because you had a moment of conscience?" "No," Cade said quietly. "You're supposed to trust the information I'm providing, verify it independently, and use it to survive what's coming. Whether you trust me personally is irrelevant." "The hell it is," Commander Hayes growled. "You'll be traveling with us, sleeping in proximity to our alpha, positioned to strike when she's most vulnerable. Your trustworthiness is extremely relevant." "Then bind me," Cade suggested. "Use suppression cuffs, assign guards. Put whatever magical restrictions Oracle Vera can conjure on my abilities. I don't care. I'll submit to whatever security measures make you comfortable, as long as you use the intelligence I'm providing." The offer seemed to surprise everyone except Oracle Vera, who was studying Cade with calculating eyes. "That's a significant gesture," the ancient shaman observed. "An alpha volunteering for suppression? You must be serious about switching sides." "I'm serious about not watching the supernatural world collapse because I was too much of a coward to help prevent it," Cade replied. Lyra felt the mate bond resonating with his sincerity, but she also knew that bonds could be misleading. Cade believed what he was saying, but that didn't mean he wouldn't change his mind again when things got difficult. "We'll discuss security protocols later," she said, cutting off the brewing argument. "Right now, we need to focus on the intelligence. Cade, walk us through the ambush plans again. Everything you know." As Cade began explaining the details using the maps he'd brought, Lyra watched her counsel's reactions carefully. Arya was taking notes with mechanical precision, her face revealing nothing. Commander Hayes was marking tactical positions on a separate map, his military mind already working through counter-strategies. Elena was listening intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific alphas or locations. And Oracle Vera. Oracle Vera was watching Lyra instead of Cade, her ancient eyes knowing in ways that made Lyra uncomfortable. "The vampire scouts are the real problem," Cade was saying. "They can track movement in ways werewolves can't, and they're coordinating with the ambush teams via some kind of blood magic communication. Even if you bypass the western road, they'll adjust once they realize you're not coming that way. Unless we give them something else to track," Arya said suddenly. A decoy convoy on the western road, while the real group takes the eastern pass. That would require splitting our forces, Commander Hayes objected. We're already operating with minimal security. Dividing further might be exactly what we need, Lyra interrupted, seeing where Arya was going. The conspirators are expecting me to travel with maximum protection because I'm weakened. If we send a heavily guarded convoy on the obvious route, while a small, fast group slips through the dangerous pass, the ambush triggers on the decoy, and by the time they realize their mistake, you're already at the crossroads under neutral ground protection, Arya finished. It could work, Cade said slowly. But you'd need the decoy to be convincing. A closed carriage that could plausibly contain an alpha. Enough guards to suggest you're taking the threat seriously. And someone willing to risk being the bait, Commander Hayes added grimly. I'll do it, Elena said immediately. Every eye turned to her. She was sitting at the far end of the table, looking smaller and more fragile than Lyra remembered from childhood. But her voice was steady. I'll ride in the carriage as the decoy, Elena continued. I'm the right build to pass for Lyra at a distance, and… She met Lyra's eyes directly. And I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid. Let me do this. Let me help protect you the way I should have 6 months ago. Lyra felt something complicated twist in her chest. Part of her wanted to refuse, to not give Elena the chance at redemption. But the tactical part of her brain recognized that Elena's offer made strategic sense, and the part of her that remembered being 5 years old and alone in a cave wanted to believe that the woman who had raised her could still choose to do the right thing. The ambush won't be gentle, she said carefully. They're planning to overwhelm with numbers and kill quickly. Even when they realize it's not me in the carriage, they might not stop until everyone in the convoy is dead. I understand the risks, Elena said. I'm volunteering anyway. Then we'll need to make the decoy convoy actually defensible, Commander Hayes said, already adjusting his tactical plans. 40 wolves, mixed combat specialties, with fallback positions planned along the western road. We make them work for it, buy enough time for the conspirators to commit fully before they realize it's a feint. And we'll need a driver who knows the eastern pass intimately, Oracle Vera added. Those cliff roads are treacherous even in daylight. At night, with a small group moving at speed. She shook her head. One wrong turn and we're all dying in a ravine instead of at the crossroads. I know someone, Arya said quietly. A rejected wolf who joined us 3 months ago. She's from the mountain packs originally. Grew up on those roads. If anyone can navigate the eastern pass at night, it's her. Then we have the framework of a plan, Lyra said. Decoy convoy leaves at dawn, takes the western road with maximum visibility. Real group leaves at dusk, travels light and fast on the eastern pass. We arrive at the crossroads just after midnight, ahead of schedule, and from an unexpected direction. She looked around the table at faces that ranged from determined to terrified. This is dangerous. If anything goes wrong, if the vampires realize the deception too quickly, if the eastern pass is more treacherous than we anticipate, if the conspirators have backup plans we don't know about, people are going to die. Her voice grew harder. I won't force anyone to come. This is volunteer only. I'm in, Arya said immediately. As am I. Commander Hayes agreed. I'm always in, Oracle Vera added, with a dry smile. I volunteer for the decoy convoy. Elena repeated. All eyes turned to Cade, who had been listening to the planning with growing respect for the tactical sophistication of Lyra's counsel. I'm with you, he said simply. Real group, Eastern Pass. Wherever you're going, that's where I need to be. Lyra felt the mate bond pulse with his commitment. Then we're decided. Arya, start organizing the decoy convoy and brief Elena on what she needs to know. Commander Hayes, select the real group. Experienced fighters who can move fast and quiet. Oracle Vera, any magical protections you can prepare for the Eastern Pass journey would be appreciated. Cade, a knock at the chamber door interrupted her. Everyone tensed. This room was supposed to be secure, with strict orders that no one was to disturb the War Council. Commander Hayes moved to the door, his hand on his weapon. Who is it? Marcus, a young voice called through the heavy wood. Marcus Sterling. I have information about the gathering that Alpha Silverblood needs to hear immediately. Lyra exchanged glances with her counsel. Marcus Sterling was one of her success stories, a rejected alpha who had joined the Borderlands pack 2 months ago after his own pack cast him out for refusing to follow tradition. He'd proven himself valuable, helping to organize the democratic council structure and train newer arrivals. But the timing of this interruption was suspicious. Let him in, Lyra decided, but stay alert. The door opened to reveal Marcus, NEIPP, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of intense eyes that had made more than one pack member develop an inconvenient crush on him. He stepped into the room, took in the assembled council, and his expression shifted to something complicated when he saw Cade. "Alpha Blackthorn," he said coolly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Things change," Cade replied evenly. "What's this information you needed to share so urgently?" Marcus pulled out a sealed letter, his hands trembling slightly. "This arrived by vampire courier, an hour ago. It's addressed to Alpha Silverblood, but the seal." He placed it on the table. "The seal is the mark of the first vampire's followers." The room went silent. Oracle Vera leaned forward, studying the seal without touching the letter. "He's right," she said grimly. "That's the cult of the first. They were supposedly eliminated centuries ago, but apparently, they're more resilient than we thought." Lyra reached for the letter, but Oracle Vera caught her wrist. "Wait. Let me check it for curses first." The cult is known for weaponizing their correspondence. After several tense minutes of magical examination, Oracle Vera nodded. "It's clean. You can open it." Lyra broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful, which made the words themselves even more chilling. "Dear Alpha Silverblood, congratulations on surviving this long. Your grandmother lasted decades before we arranged her elimination. You've managed 6 months, which is admirable given your circumstances. We are writing to inform you that your presence at the Crossroads gathering has been anticipated and planned for. Every route you might take, every ally you might recruit, every strategy you might employ, all have been accounted for in our calculations. You are walking into a trap from which there is no escape, but we are offering you an alternative. Join us. Acknowledge that the first vampire's return is inevitable, and position yourself on the winning side. Help us prepare the supernatural world for his reign, and you will be granted a position of power in the new order. Resist, and you will die with everyone else who clings to the obsolete dream of species cooperation. The choice is yours, but you have until the gathering to decide. Choose wisely, little Silverblood. The old world is ending. The only question is whether you end with it. Eternally yours. The Council of First Blood." Lyra read the letter twice, then handed it to Arya, who shared it with the rest of the council. The reactions ranged from anger to fear to, in Cade's case, something that looked like guilt. "They know we're coming," Commander Hayes said flatly. "The decoy plan, the Eastern Pass, they know all of it." "Not necessarily," Oracle Vera countered. "This letter is deliberately vague. Every route, every strategy, that could mean they have specific intelligence, or it could be psychological warfare designed to make us second-guess ourselves into paralysis. Or it could mean we have a spy in our inner circle," Arya said, looking pointedly at Cade. "Someone who's been feeding them information." "It's not me," Cade said, his voice tight. "I swear." "Your oath means nothing," Marcus interrupted, his voice cold. "You've already betrayed Alpha Silverblood once. Why should we believe you won't do it again?" The accusation hung in the air. Lyra felt the mate bond resonating with Cade's genuine distress, but she also couldn't ignore the logic. Cade had access to everything they'd discussed, if he was still playing both sides. But then something clicked in her mind. "Something about the timing, Marcus," she said slowly. "How did you know Alpha Blackthorn was here? This meeting was confidential. We told no one outside this room that Cade would be joining us." Marcus's expression flickered for just a moment, too fast for a human to catch, but Lyra's enhanced senses, even compromised, caught it. Fear, calculation, and underneath it all, resignation. "I saw him arrive earlier," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "No, you didn't," Commander Hayes said, catching on to what Lyra had spotted. Cade entered through the shadow passages using Oracle Vera's magic. No one saw him arrive. The only way you could know he was here is if someone told you, or if you've been monitoring this room somehow. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop as everyone turned to look at Marcus. His handsome face had gone pale, and his hand was moving slowly toward his jacket. "Don't," Lyra said quietly, her weakened abilities still strong enough to flood the room with alpha command. "Whatever you're reaching for, leave it where it is." Marcus's hand froze. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he laughed. A bitter, broken sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Of course you figured it out. I should have known better than to underestimate a silverblood, even a poisoned one." His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Yes, I've been monitoring the room. Blood magic ritual the vampires taught me lets them hear everything discussed in spaces I've marked with my blood. They know about your plans. All of them." The betrayal hit harder than it should have. Lyra had known intellectually that she might have spies in her organization, but Marcus, a rejected alpha who'd seemed so genuine, so committed to the Borderlands vision. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were rejected by your own pack. You know what that pain feels like. Why betray other rejected wolves?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Because I wasn't actually rejected, Alpha. I was planted. The whole story about being cast out for refusing tradition? Fabricated. I'm a deep cover agent for the Vampire Council, placed here 2 months ago to feed them intelligence and sabotage your operations when necessary." He looked around the room at the shocked faces. "You want to know the real joke? I actually started to believe in what you were building. The democratic councils, the pack bonds based on trust instead of coercion, the genuine community you've created." His voice cracked. "I started to believe maybe there was another way. Maybe I could be more than just a vampire's puppet." "Then why not switch sides?" Arya demanded. "Why not come to us, explain the situation, help us root out the conspiracy?" "Because they have my sister," Marcus said flatly. "She's being held in vampire territory as insurance against my loyalty. If I betray them, she dies. If I die without completing my mission, she dies. If I try to rescue her, she dies." His eyes met Lyra's. "They've thought of everything, Alpha. Every possible contingency, every potential betrayal. They've been planning your elimination for months, and I'm just one piece of a much larger operation." The silence that followed was oppressive. Finally, Oracle Vera spoke. "How much do they know?" "Everything discussed in this room for the past 2 months, Marcus admitted, including today's planning session. They know about the decoy convoy, the Eastern Pass route, Elena's volunteer as bait. They know Cade switched sides. They know about the suppression poison and how compromised Lyra's abilities are. They know," he faltered. "They know about the prophecy, about the first vampire's prison weakening, about the mate bond power needed to repair it. Then we're compromised on every level," Commander Hayes said grimly. "Every plan we make, they'll know about. Every route we take, they'll anticipate. We're playing a game where the other side can see all our cards." "Not all our cards," Lyra said slowly, an idea forming. "They can see what we discuss in this room, but they can't read our minds. They can't know what we're planning if we don't discuss it out loud." She looked at Marcus directly. "You said you started to believe in what we're building. Was that true, or was it part of the deception?" "It was true," Marcus said quietly. "For what that's worth." "Then here's what's going to happen," Lyra said, her voice taking on the weight of Alpha Command. "You're going to continue feeding the vampires information. But from now on, you're going to feed them what I want them to know. Disinformation, false plans, manufactured intelligence that sends them preparing for the wrong scenarios." She turned to Oracle Vera. "Can you keep him from communicating anything we don't want him to share? Some kind of selective binding that lets him control exactly what information gets through his blood magic link?" The ancient shaman was already nodding. "It's complex magic, but yes, I can create a filter that lets him send only what we approve, while blocking everything else. The vampires won't know their intelligence has been compromised unless we want them to." "You'd do that?" Marcus asked, clearly shocked. "After I betrayed you, you'd trust me to be a double agent?" "I don't trust you," Lyra corrected. "But I trust Oracle Vera's magic, and I trust your desire to save your sister. Help us win at the crossroads, help us survive what's coming, and I promise you, we will get your sister back. The vampires will kill her the moment they realize I've turned. Not if we move fast enough, Kate interrupted. I know where the Vampire Council keeps their leverage prisoners. It's part of why they wanted me involved. Needed a werewolf who could navigate their security protocols. I can get your sister out, but only if we move during the gathering when their attention is divided. Marcus looked between Lyra and Cade, hope and disbelief warring on his face. You'd risk a rescue operation in the middle of everything else? Why? Because that's what we do here, Arya said firmly. We don't abandon pack members, even ones who betrayed us. If your sister is being held hostage, she's a victim too. We protect victims. The words seemed to break something in Marcus. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. I've been reporting on you for 2 months, he said, his voice muffled, helping them target your weaknesses, contributing to plans that would have gotten you all killed. And you're still willing to help me? We're willing to help your sister, Lyra corrected. Whether you personally get forgiveness or just get to live with what you've done, that's something you'll have to work out with yourself and with this pack over time. She looked around at her council. Here's the new plan. Oracle Vera, you work with Marcus to set up the disinformation campaign. Feed the vampires fake intel about our gathering strategy. IMC, maybe have them think we're abandoning the whole mission, going into hiding instead of attending. Commander Hayes, you still prepare the decoy convoy, but we don't discuss any real details where Marcus can hear them. Arya, you coordinate with the mountain pack guide for the Eastern Pass route. Again, all communication happens outside this chamber. And me? Kate asked. You're going to draw us a map of the vampire security protocols. Every detail you know about where they keep hostages, how their guards patrol, what their emergency responses look like. Lyra's voice grew harder. Because we're not just going to the crossroads to plead for cooperation. We're going to demonstrate what cooperation can achieve by pulling off an impossible rescue mission in the middle of a supernatural summit. That's insane, Commander Hayes said. We'll be trying to survive political assassination while simultaneously running a military operation in enemy territory? That's the point, Lyra replied. They're expecting us to be defensive, to spend all our energy just trying to stay alive. They're not expecting us to go on offense. And while they're distracted by our desperate attempts to negotiate peace, we're going to be systematically dismantling their leverage over Marcus and anyone else they're blackmailing into cooperation. She stood, despite the pain pulsing through her poisoned system. My grandmother tried to unite the supernatural world through force and failed. The vampire cult thinks they can divide us through fear and manipulation, but they've both forgotten something important. The strongest bonds aren't forged through domination or terror. They're forged through sacrifice for people who matter. Her eyes met each council member in turn. We're going to save Marcus's sister not because it's tactically smart, though it is, but because it's the right thing to do. And we're going to do it in front of every supernatural leader who's written off cooperation as impossible. We're going to show them what real pack bonds look like. The silence that followed was different from before. Not shock or fear, but something else. Something that might have been hope mixed with determination. 30 hours until we leave, Lyra said quietly. 30 hours to prepare for the most dangerous gambit any of us has ever attempted. Use them well. As the council dispersed to their various tasks, Oracle Vera caught Lyra's arm. You know this could fail spectacularly, the ancient shaman said. Multiple fronts, divided attention, operating while poisoned. You're betting everything on a strategy that requires perfect execution and significant luck. I know, Lyra replied. But that's what crossroads are, aren't they? Points where you have to choose a direction knowing you might be choosing wrong. My grandmother chose conquest. I'm choosing cooperation. We'll see which one history judges more kindly. Oracle Vera studied her for a long moment, then smiled. A rare expression of genuine warmth. Your grandmother would hate everything about your approach, she said, which is exactly why it might work. Chapter 6. The supernatural war begins. The Eastern Pass looked like something from a nightmare. Lyra stood at the base of the cliff road as twilight deepened into true darkness, watching the narrow path wind upward into mountains shrouded in mist. The route was barely wide enough for 2 wolves traveling single file, with sheer drops on one side and crumbling rock face on the other. In the darkness, with her enhanced senses flickering unreliably from the poison, it looked like a path designed specifically to kill anyone stupid enough to attempt it. Second thoughts? Cade asked quietly from beside her. Hundreds, Lyra admitted, but we're out of better options. Their group was exactly as planned, 5 wolves plus their mountain guide, a wiry woman named Sage who had grown up on these treacherous paths. They traveled light, carrying only essential supplies and weapons. Speed and stealth were their only advantages now. Somewhere to the west, Elena was leading the decoy convoy along the main road, deliberately visible and heavily guarded. Marcus had fed the vampires information that Lyra would be traveling with that group, protected by her strongest fighters. With luck, the ambush would trigger on the convoy, giving the real group time to reach the crossroads undetected. With luck. The first section is the easiest, Sage said, her voice barely above a whisper. Wide enough for comfortable passage, relatively stable ground. It's the middle section, the Devil's Spine, where things get interesting. Define interesting, Commander Hayes said dryly. Path narrows to 18 inches at its tightest point. Wind gusts strong enough to knock you off balance. Loose rocks that shift under weight. And if you slip? She gestured toward the darkness, beyond the cliff edge. 2,000-foot drop onto rocks that will definitely kill you. Fantastic, Arya muttered. Why did I volunteer for this again? Because you're brilliant and reckless in equal measure, Lyra replied. Just like the rest of us. Oracle Vera finished her final ward preparations, marking the group with protective sigils that would help them navigate in darkness and shield their scents from vampire scouts. The magic itched against Lyra's skin, but she welcomed the discomfort. Pain meant she was still alive. I've done what I can, the ancient shaman said, but my magic won't protect you from gravity or stupidity. Stay focused, move carefully. And for the moon goddess's sake, don't look down. Comforting, Cade said. They began the ascent as full darkness fell. Sage led the way with the confident step of someone who had made this journey dozens of times. Behind her came Lyra, then Cade, then Arya, with Commander Hayes and Oracle Vera bringing up the rear. Single file, moving in synchronized silence that spoke to extensive training. The first hour passed without incident. The path was treacherous but navigable, and Lyra's compromised senses were still functional enough to keep her balanced. The mate bond thrummed with Cade's presence directly behind her, offering an odd sort of comfort despite their complicated history. Then they reached the Devil's Spine. This is where it gets technical, Sage warned, pausing at a point where the path narrowed dramatically. From here, we move one at a time. Wait until the person ahead reaches the next stable point before following. The rock here is unpredictable. It can't handle multiple wolves' weight simultaneously. Lyra peered ahead into the darkness, her flickering enhanced vision barely able to make out the narrow ribbon of stone disappearing into the mist. 18 inches, less than 2 feet of rock between them, and a fatal fall. This is insane, her wolf whined. We should have taken our chances with the ambush. Too late for second thoughts now, Lyra thought back. Sage moved first, demonstrating the technique, careful weight distribution, testing each step before committing, maintaining contact with the rock face for stability. She made it look almost easy, disappearing into the mist with practiced confidence. Your turn, Alpha, Commander Hayes said from behind. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped onto the Devil's Spine. Immediately, she understood why the passage had earned its ominous name. The wind here was vicious, gusting unpredictably from multiple directions. The rock beneath her feet felt unstable, shifting slightly with each step, and the darkness beyond the narrow path wasn't empty. It was full of the howling presence of a 2,000-foot drop into nothing. Don't look down, she reminded herself, echoing Oracle Vera's advice. Eyes on the path, just the path. She moved slowly, testing each foothold before transferring weight. Her compromised abilities were actually a disadvantage here. Her enhanced balance and spatial awareness kept flickering in and out, leaving her momentarily disoriented with each shift. More than once, she felt herself start to tilt toward the edge, only catching herself through sheer determination. Behind her, she could feel Cade's anxiety through the mate bond. He was waiting for his turn, watching her navigate the deadly passage, unable to help if something went wrong. Halfway across, a particularly vicious gust of wind hit without warning. Lyra's weakened abilities chose that exact moment to flicker out. For 3 terrifying seconds, she was just an ordinary wolf trying to maintain balance on an 18-inch wide path in complete darkness with hurricane-force winds trying to knock her off a cliff. She swayed, her weight shifting dangerously toward the edge. Her foot slipped on loose rock. For one crystalline moment of absolute clarity, she knew she was going to fall. Then her abilities snapped back online, and her enhanced reflexes caught her before she went over. She pressed herself flat against the rock face, gasping, waiting for her heart to stop trying to explode out of her chest. "Lyra?" Cade's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Are you okay?" "Fine," she managed, though her voice shook. "Just give me a second." She forced herself to breathe, to focus, to push through the fear. This was the crossroads the prophecy had warned about, not just the gathering, but every choice and challenge leading up to it. If she couldn't even navigate a dangerous path without her abilities failing her, how could she hope to unite supernatural species? By being stubborn, her wolf answered. By refusing to quit even when it's logical to quit. By choosing to keep going even when every instinct screams to turn back. Right. Stubbornness. She could do that. Lyra pushed away from the rock face and continued forward, step by careful step. The rest of the Devil's Spine passage took another 15 minutes of concentrated terror, but finally, she reached the stable point where Sage was waiting. "That was rough," the guide observed. "You okay?" "Alive," Lyra replied, which felt like accomplishment enough. She watched through her renewed abilities as Cade made his own crossing. He moved with the confidence of an experienced alpha, his supernatural balance making the passage look almost easy. But she could feel through the mate bond how much concentration it required, how much fear he was suppressing. Arya came next, moving with acrobatic grace that suggested extensive climbing experience. Commander Hayes followed with military precision, treating the deadly passage like any other tactical challenge. And Oracle Vera simply seemed to glide across, ancient magic making the wind part around her. "That's the worst of it," Sage said, once everyone was safely across. "The rest of the route is challenging but not actively trying to kill us." "What a relief," Arya said dryly. They continued upward, the path widening gradually as they climbed higher into the mountains. Lyra's internal clock said they'd been traveling for 3 hours, when Oracle Vera suddenly froze. "Wait," the ancient shaman said, her voice sharp with warning. "Something's wrong." Everyone stopped immediately, weapons appearing in hands with practiced speed. Lyra extended her senses as far as her poisoned abilities would allow, searching for threats in the darkness. At first, she found nothing. Then she caught it, a scent on the wind that made her blood run cold. "Vampires. They found us," Cade said, his voice grim. "Somehow, they knew we'd take this route." "Marcus," Commander Hayes growled. "He must have managed to slip information through despite the binding." "No," Oracle Vera said sharply. "My binding is absolute. If Marcus had communicated anything, I would know." She closed her eyes, extending her magical senses. "This is something else. The vampires aren't tracking us specifically, they're tracking movement on this path. They must have posted scouts on all possible routes to the crossroads, not just the obvious ones." "How many?" Lyra asked. 6, maybe 7, positioned at the next switchback, waiting for us to come into their ambush zone. Oracle Vera's expression was troubled. "We can't go back, Spine. The Devil's Spine is barely passable once, and attempting it again in true darkness would be suicide. But going forward means walking directly into their trap." Lyra's mind raced through options, but her poisoned state made strategic thinking difficult. The path ahead was narrow, offering no room for maneuvering. They couldn't climb up or down the rock face. It was too sheer, too unstable. And they couldn't wait for daylight. They needed to reach the crossroads before the gathering began. "We fight," she said finally, "but we do it smart. Sage, is there anywhere ahead where the path widens enough for combat?" "About 50 yards past the ambush point, there's a small plateau. But you'd have to get through the vampires to reach it. Then we make them come to us instead of walking into their trap." Lyra turned to Oracle Vera. "Can you create an illusion? Make it look like we're approaching when we're actually staying put. The ancient shaman's eyes gleamed with understanding. I can do better than that. I can create an illusory convoy that triggers their ambush, then when they rush forward to attack, they run directly into us, positioned and ready on ground of our choosing, Cade finished. It's a good strategy, but vampires are fast. Even with surprise on our side, 6 against our 5 in close quarters. 6 against 6, Sage corrected. I'm not much of a fighter, but I can hold my own with a blade. Make that 6 against 5 and a very angry grandmother, Oracle Vera added. I may be ancient, but I've forgotten more combat magic than most vampires ever learn. Lyra felt something warm settle in her chest. The same feeling she got every time her pack demonstrated their loyalty despite overwhelming odds. This was what her grandmother had never understood. Power didn't come from domination. It came from wolves willing to fight beside you because they chose to, not because they were compelled. Positions, she ordered quietly. Sage, you and Commander Hayes take the high ground on the left. Arya, right side with Oracle Vera. Cade, you're with me at the center point. When the vampires rush the illusion, we hit them from 3 directions simultaneously. Fast and brutal. We can't afford a prolonged fight, not with my abilities this compromised. They moved into position with the practiced efficiency of wolves, who had trained together extensively. Oracle Vera began weaving her illusion magic, creating phantoms that looked and moved like their group continuing along the path. The vampires took the bait beautifully. Lyra watched through the darkness as 6 pale figures emerged from concealment at the switchback ahead. They moved with the supernatural speed that made vampires such deadly opponents, blurring toward what they thought was an unaware group of wolves. Now, Lyra roared, and her pack struck. The vampires realized their mistake a second too late. They'd been expecting to attack an exposed group on a narrow path. Instead, they ran directly into a coordinated ambush, where werewolves had superior positioning and the element of surprise. Commander Hayes took down the first vampire with a silver blade through the heart, one of the few weapons that could kill vampires permanently. Arya moved like liquid shadow, her twin daggers finding vulnerable spots with surgical precision. Oracle Vera's magic lashed out in arcs of silver fire that made vampires scream and recoil. Cade and Lyra moved together with the unconscious synchronization that came from mate bonds, even damaged ones. Where Cade's raw power created openings, Lyra's strategic strikes exploited them. Where Lyra's weakened state made her vulnerable, Cade's protective instincts covered her gaps. It was brutal, efficient, and over in less than 90 seconds. 5 vampires lay dead or dying on the mountain path. The 6th had managed to break free from the melee and was attempting to flee back toward the switchback, likely to warn others of the group's location. Lyra's compromised abilities chose that moment to surge unexpectedly, giving her one brief window of full Silverblood power. She reached out with pack command magic, but instead of targeting werewolves, she threw everything she had at the fleeing vampire. To her shock, it worked. The vampire froze mid-stride, caught in supernatural compulsion that shouldn't have been possible. Grandmother's abilities had extended beyond just wolves. She'd been able to command any creature with sufficient supernatural essence. Lyra had never tested whether she'd inherited that particular gift. Apparently, she had. "Come here," she commanded, and the vampire turned and walked back toward her like a puppet on strings. His crimson eyes were wide with terror and confusion. Vampires weren't supposed to be susceptible to werewolf compulsion magic, but Silverblood abilities weren't ordinary werewolf magic. "Who sent you?" Lyra demanded, maintaining the compulsion through sheer force of will even as she felt her abilities starting to flicker again. "Who knew we'd be taking this route?" The Council of First Blood," the vampire gasped, fighting the compulsion but unable to break it. "They have seers, witches who can see possible futures. They saw you taking multiple routes. Sent scouts to all of them. How many other ambush points?" 3. Western Road, Southern Valley, and here. We were supposed to delay you until the main force could arrive. Not kill you, delay only. The council wants you alive for the ceremony." Ice flooded Lyra's veins. "What ceremony?" "The awakening. When the first vampire rises, he requires a sacrifice. Powerful blood to complete his transformation. They want The vampire's voice dropped to a whisper. They want silver blood. Your death will fuel his resurrection. The compulsion shattered as Lyra's abilities flickered out completely. The vampire stumbled backward, but Commander Hayes was already there, silver blade pressed to his throat. What do we do with him? The commander asked. Lyra's first instinct was execution. Leave no witnesses, no one to report their position. But she thought about what she was trying to build, about the demonstration she needed to make at the crossroads. We take him with us, she decided. He's evidence. Proof that the Vampire Council is actively working to resurrect the first vampire. When we arrive at the crossroads, he can testify about the cult's plans. He'll slow us down, Kate objected. Then we move faster. Lyra looked at the bodies of the 5 dead vampires. Oracle Vera, can you do something about these? I don't want scouts finding evidence of a battle here. I can make them disappear. The ancient shaman agreed. But it will drain my reserves significantly. If we encounter another ambush, we won't, Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. They put scouts at the 3 most likely routes. This was the Eastern Pass ambush. The others are focused on routes we're not taking. She hoped she was right, because they'd just used up most of their element of surprise and a significant portion of their combat resources. If another ambush was waiting ahead, how much further to the crossroads? She asked Sage. 4 more hours on this path, maybe 3 if we push hard. The guide looked at the steep trail ahead. It's all descent from here, which is easier but also more dangerous. One wrong step and we're tumbling down the mountain. Then we move carefully but quickly. Oracle Vera, can you maintain detection wards while we travel? I want maximum warning if anyone else is approaching. I can manage that much, the ancient shaman agreed. They secured the vampire prisoner with silver chains, painful for him, but necessary to prevent escape, and continued their journey. The descent was indeed treacherous, but the path grew steadily wider as they dropped altitude. Lyra's abilities continued their unpredictable flickering, making each step a gamble, but she pushed through the discomfort. They'd been traveling for another 2 hours when Oracle Vera's communication crystal flared to life. That's Elena, the shaman said, checking the magical signature. From the decoy convoy, she activated the crystal, and Elena's voice filled the night air, tight with strain. Lyra, if you're receiving this, the ambush was significant. 50 wolves, coordinated assault. We're holding them off, but they realized it was a decoy faster than expected. They've already dispatched tracking teams toward the other routes. You need to move fast. They'll figure out you took the Eastern Pass within the hour. Gunfire and howling echoed in the background of the transmission. We've taken casualties, but we're managing. Commander Sterling's sister, someone claiming to be her, just appeared at the ambush site demanding to speak with you. She says it's a trap, that Marcus was supposed to lure you into vampire territory during the gathering. The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Elena, Lyra shouted, but there was no response. The signal's been jammed, Oracle Vera said grimly. Something powerful is blocking communication between here and the Western Road. Marcus's sister is there, Arya said urgently. If she's warning us about a trap, if she's trying to help, it could be another deception, Commander Hayes interrupted, getting us to doubt Marcus when he's actually feeding us good intelligence. Or it could be the truth, Cade said. We need more information before. A howl split the night air, not from their group, but from somewhere behind them on the trail. Then another howl answered it from ahead, and a third from the valley below. We're surrounded, Sage said, her face pale. Those are tracker calls. They've figured out where we are. Lyra extended her flickering senses as far as they would go, and felt her stomach drop. Dozens of signatures converging on their position from multiple directions. Werewolves and vampires working together in coordinated pursuit. They'd been betrayed, ambushed, and now they were being hunted by a force that vastly outnumbered them. And they were still 2 hours from the crossroads and its neutral ground protections. Run, Lyra ordered. Forget caution, forget stealth. We run, and we don't stop until we reach sanctuary or die trying. They ran. Chapter 7. The Choice. Love or Duty. Running down a mountain path in near total darkness while being hunted by dozens of supernatural predators was, Lyra decided, not an experience she would recommend to anyone. Her compromised abilities flickered in and out like a strobe light, leaving her alternating between enhanced perception and normal wolf senses. Each flicker was disorienting, causing her to stumble over obstacles she couldn't see consistently. Only the mate bond connection to Cade kept her oriented, his steady presence behind her acting as a lifeline when her own senses failed. "They're gaining," Commander Hayes reported from the rear, his military training making him an excellent rearguard. Vampires mostly, using their speed advantage on the downhill terrain. Werewolves are hanging back, waiting for us to reach the valley floor where they can surround us. "How many?" Lyra gasped, her lungs burning from exertion and poison. "Too many. At least 30 vampires in pursuit, another 40 wolves moving to cut off valley access." His voice was grim. "We're not going to outrun them, Alpha. We need to make a stand, or find another option." "The crossroads entrance is just ahead," Sage called from the front. "Maybe a mile, but it's across open ground with no cover. If we can reach it." "We'll be cut down before we get halfway," Cade interrupted. "Look." He pointed toward the valley floor, where torches were appearing in organized patterns. The werewolf forces weren't just pursuing, they were establishing a perimeter, cutting off every route to the crossroads entrance, except the one they wanted their prey to take. The one that was undoubtedly the most heavily trapped. "It's a killing field," Arya said, her tactical assessment matching what everyone else was seeing. "They're herding us toward that central approach, where they can concentrate fire. We walk into that, and we're dead." Oracle Vera's ancient eyes were scanning the darkness, searching for options that didn't exist. "My magic could provide concealment, but not for 6 wolves moving at speed across open ground. The moment we break cover, they'll see us." "What about the vampire prisoner?" Commander Hayes suggested. "We could use him as a hostage. Threaten to kill him if they don't let us pass." "They don't care," the vampire said bitterly. He'd been mostly silent during their desperate flight, but now he spoke up. "The Council of First Blood values the mission above individual lives. They'll sacrifice me without hesitation if it means stopping Silverblood from reaching the gathering." Lyra's mind raced through impossible scenarios, trying to find a path through enemy forces that didn't end with everyone dead. Her poisoned state made strategic thinking difficult, but certain things became crystalline clear. They couldn't fight. They were outnumbered, 10 to 1. They couldn't hide. Oracle Vera's magic wasn't strong enough to conceal a moving group. They couldn't outrun pursuers who were faster and less exhausted, which left one option that made her stomach turn. "Cade," she said quietly, "you need to take everyone and circle around to the northern approach while I provide a distraction." "Absolutely not," Cade replied immediately. "It's the only way. It's suicide." He interrupted. "You walk out there alone and they'll swarm you in seconds. Your abilities are failing, you're poisoned, you're exhausted, you won't last a minute. I don't need to last long, just long enough for you to get everyone to safety." Lyra turned to face him, seeing the raw fear in his storm-gray eyes. "The prophecy says a Silverblood has to be at the crossroads, but it doesn't say I have to survive getting there. Maybe my role is just to make sure the right people arrive with the right information." "That's not how prophecies work," Oracle Vera said sharply. "You can't fulfill a destiny you're not alive to complete." "Unless my destiny is to clear the path for something better," Lyra countered. "My grandmother tried to unite supernatural species through force. Maybe I'm supposed to unite them through sacrifice. Show them what wolves will do for each other, what genuine pack bonds look like." She could feel the mate bond resonating with Cade's distress, but she pushed forward anyway. "You can finish what I started. Present the evidence, expose the first vampire cult, convince the gathering that cooperation is necessary. You don't need me for that. You need the information we've gathered, and the testament of wolves willing to work together." "Stop," Cade said, his voice breaking. "Just stop. You don't get to make that choice." "Actually, I do. I'm the Alpha. This is my pack, my responsibility. And you're my mate." The words burst from Cade like they'd been building pressure for months. "You're my mate, Lyra. Not my rejected bond, not my political inconvenience, not the wolf I stupidly pushed away because I was too broken to accept what we could be. You're my mate, And I am not letting you die." The raw emotion in his voice stopped everyone in their tracks. They'd all paused in a small clearing, torches visible in multiple directions as the net tightened around them. "The mate bond doesn't give you the right to overrule my tactical decisions," Lyra said, but her voice was gentler now. "The hell it doesn't." Cade moved closer, his hands gripping her shoulders. "6 months ago, I rejected you because I was terrified of being vulnerable. Because I'd spent my whole life believing that needing someone was weakness. And you know what that got me? 6 months of watching you build something beautiful while I wallowed in my own cowardice." His eyes blazed with intensity that had nothing to do with supernatural powers. "I've been in therapy. I've done the work. I've examined every broken piece of myself and started trying to put them back together in a way that doesn't hurt everyone around me. And the one thing I know, the one absolute truth I've discovered, is that I love you. Not the bond, not the prophecy, not some mystical moon goddess connection. I love you. The stubborn, brilliant, compassionate wolf who showed me what real strength looks like." Lyra felt tears burning in her eyes. "Cade, I'm not finished." His voice dropped to something raw and vulnerable. "You said once that bonds require trust, and you couldn't trust me not to reject you again. You were right, but I'm asking you to trust me now. Not with your love or your forgiveness or any of the things I don't deserve. Just with your life. Let me protect you the way I should have from the beginning." "How?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How do you propose we survive this?" Cade looked around at the assembled group, then back to her. "The mate bond," he said. "Oracle Vera mentioned that a completed bond could channel combined power. We've never tried it because we've never trusted each other enough. But if we did, if we actually allowed the full connection, you'd have access to my silver blood abilities," Lyra finished, understanding. "And I'd have access to your alpha strength. Combined power, shared between us. It might be enough to break through the perimeter," Oracle Vera said thoughtfully. "A fully bonded alpha pair channeling silver blood magic? That's power on a scale we haven't seen since Isabella's time. It might not just get you through. It might reshape the entire battlefield. But completing a mate bond requires absolute vulnerability," Arya objected. "Total trust, complete emotional openness. Can you two actually achieve that given your history?" It was a fair question. Lyra looked at Cade. Really looked at him, and saw past the confident alpha exterior to the broken, desperate wolf underneath. The one who'd been taught that vulnerability meant death. The one who'd spent 6 months trying to become someone worthy of her. She thought about the prophecy, about the choice between love and duty. Everyone assumed it meant choosing between saving the world and being with Cade. But maybe it meant something else. Maybe it meant choosing to believe that love and duty could be the same thing. That the power needed to save the supernatural world came not from domination or sacrifice, but from 2 broken wolves choosing to trust each other despite every reason not to. "The bond completion will leave us both vulnerable while it's happening," she said slowly. "Someone will have to protect us. We'll form a defensive circle," Commander Hayes said immediately. "Give you whatever time you need. It could take minutes," Oracle Vera warned. "Minutes you'll be completely exposed, defenseless against any attack. Then we defend for minutes," Arya replied. "It's not like we have better options." Lyra looked around at her pack, the wolves who had followed her despite having every reason to stay safe. Sage, who'd guided them through deadly terrain. Commander Hayes, who'd stood by her from the beginning. Arya, who'd believed in her vision when no one else did. Oracle Vera, who'd risked everything to awaken her abilities, even the vampire prisoner, who was watching this unfold with something that might have been awe. And Cade, always Cade, her rejected mate who was asking for one more chance to prove he could be what she needed. "If we do this," she said quietly, "if we complete the bond, there's no going back. We'll be connected permanently. You'll feel everything I feel, know everything I know. There will be no barriers between us." "Good," Cade said simply. "I'm done with barriers." The howls of pursuing vampires were getting closer. They had maybe 3 minutes before the enemy was on top of them. Lyra made her choice. "Everyone form up. Defensive positions around us. Hold them off as long as you can." She turned to Cade, her heart hammering. "And you, try not to run screaming," when you see all the broken pieces I've been hiding. I've got plenty of my own, Cade replied. We'll figure it out together. They knelt, facing each other in the center of the clearing, while the others formed a protective circle around them. Oracle Vera began chanting in the old tongue, weaving magic that would facilitate the bond completion. The air itself seemed to thicken with supernatural energy. This is going to hurt, Oracle Vera warned. Completing a mate bond that's been rejected and repaired is like breaking and resetting a bone. It's necessary, but it's not gentle. Nothing about our relationship has been gentle, Lyra said. Why start now? Cade took her hands, and the mate bond flared between them like lightning. But this time, instead of pulling away from the intensity, they both leaned into it, opened themselves to it, let it wash over and through them without resistance. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Lyra felt Cade's emotions flooding through her, decades of fear and isolation, the crushing weight of expectations, the self-loathing that came from knowing he'd destroyed something precious because he was too broken to accept it. She felt his love for her, raw and desperate and slightly terrified. She felt his determination to be better, mixed with doubt about whether he could sustain it. And Cade felt her, all the pain of rejection and betrayal, the anger she'd been carrying like armor, the fear that she was repeating her grandmother's mistakes. He felt her love for him too, buried under layers of protection, but undeniably present. He felt her exhaustion from carrying everyone's hopes while slowly dying from poison. The bond deepened, tearing down every emotional barrier either of them had constructed. It was violating and intimate and terrifying and perfect all at once. Around them, the sounds of combat erupted as vampires reached the clearing. "Contact!" Commander Hayes roared. "Hold the line." Silver blades flashed in torchlight. Oracle Vera's magic lashed out in defensive waves. Arya moved like a dancer, her weapons finding vulnerable spots with deadly precision. Even Sage was fighting with desperate courage, defending wolves she'd only known for hours. But they were being overwhelmed. Too many enemies, too little time. "Almost there," Oracle Vera gasped. Her voice strained from maintaining both protective magic and the bonding ritual. Just a few more seconds. A vampire broke through the defensive line, moving with supernatural speed toward the vulnerable alphas in the center. Commander Hayes tried to intercept, but the vampire was too fast. The vampire prisoner threw himself into the attacker's path. The two vampires went down in a tangle of limbs and snarls. The prisoner's silver chains burned his own flesh as he grappled with his former ally, buying precious seconds. "Why?" Commander Hayes shouted at him while dispatching another attacker. "Because," the vampire gasped. "I'm tired of being on the wrong side of history." The bond completed with a sound like reality itself breaking and reforming. Power exploded outward from Lyra and Cade in concentric waves of silver light. Every attacker within 50 feet was thrown backward by the sheer force of combined silverblood alpha energy channeling through a complete mate bond. Lyra felt it all, Cade's strength amplifying her abilities, her power giving him access to magic he'd never possessed. They were still separate wolves, but also something more. Something that hadn't existed since Isabella's time, and maybe not even then, because Isabella had never trusted anyone enough to complete a true bond. She stood, pulling Cade up with her, and they moved as one entity with two bodies. "Run," Lyra commanded the attacking forces, and her voice carried harmonics of combined alpha power that made even vampires stumble. "Or stay and learn what happens when you corner a bonded silverblood pair." The smart ones ran. The ones loyal to the first vampire cult stayed, and Lyra almost felt sorry for them. What happened next was over in less than 30 seconds. Cade's combat experience guided their movements, while Lyra's silverblood abilities made those movements supernaturally effective. They moved through attackers like shadows, each strike precise and devastating. The mate bond let them fight with perfect coordination, anticipating each other's actions before they happened. When the last attacker fell, the clearing was silent, except for ragged breathing and the crackle of Oracle Vera's magical fires. "That," Commander Hayes said slowly, "was the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever witnessed." Lyra looked down at their joined hands, still glowing faintly with residual power. The poison was still in her system, still working to suppress her abilities. But now she had Cade's strength flowing through the bond, compensating for her weakness. And Cade had access to abilities that made him far more than just a powerful alpha. "The crossroads," she said, her voice steadier than it had been in days. "We can make it now." "You can make anything now," Oracle Vera corrected, looking at them with something like wonder. "A fully bonded silverblood pair? Child, you've just become the most powerful supernatural entity in this hemisphere, possibly the world." "Then let's go show the gathering what cooperation looks like," Cade said, his voice blending with Lyra's in supernatural harmony. They ran for the crossroads entrance. But this time they weren't fleeing. They were advancing, with purpose and power, and the kind of unity that could reshape the supernatural world. If they survived the next few hours. Chapter 8. The Gathering at the Crossroads. The crossroads existed in a space between territories, where ancient magic kept the ground neutral and binding oaths prevented violence. The entrance was marked by standing stones covered in symbols from every supernatural species, werewolf runes intertwined with vampire sigils, witch marks spiraling around Fey script. Lyra and her group stumbled through the barrier at 3 minutes past midnight. Exactly as the first session of the gathering was scheduled to begin. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. The main hall of the crossroads was a massive circular chamber carved from living stone, with tiered seating arranged so every faction could see every other faction. Werewolf delegations occupied the eastern quadrant. Vampire councils held the western sections. Witch covens clustered in the north. And various other supernatural species filled the remaining spaces. At the center of it all, on a raised dais, sat the 3 primary leaders. King Aldrich for the werewolves, Lady Seraphina Nightborn for the vampires, and High Priestess Morgana for the witch covens. They were mid-sentence when Lyra's group burst through the doors. "Cannot allow unilateral action without." Lady Seraphina's words died as every eye in the chamber turned to the new arrivals. Lyra knew what they saw. 6 wolves covered in blood and dirt, some of it their own. A captured vampire in silver chains. And at the center, 2 alphas glowing with the residual power of a freshly completed mate bond, holding hands like their lives depended on it. Because they did. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then King Aldrich stood slowly, his ancient eyes sharp with recognition and something that might have been respect. "Alpha Silverblood," he said formally. "You're late, and you appear to have brought violence to neutral ground. The violence happened outside your precious neutral zone," Lyra replied, her voice carrying clearly despite her exhaustion. "We were ambushed 3 times on our journey here, by forces coordinating between vampires and werewolves. Forces that violated a dozen supernatural treaties to prevent us from attending this gathering." Lady Seraphina's perfect face showed nothing, but Lyra could sense the vampire leader's subtle tension. "That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof?" "We have him." Commander Hayes pushed the vampire prisoner forward. "A member of the Council of First Blood, taken during their attack on the Eastern Pass. He's been quite informative about your plans." The chamber erupted in whispers. The Council of First Blood was supposed to be a myth, a cautionary tale vampires told to keep young ones in line. Seeing a living member in chains was like discovering dragons were real. "I don't recognize any Council of First Blood," Lady Seraphina said coolly. "This vampire could be anyone making wild claims." "He could be," Lyra agreed. "Except Oracle Vera verified his story through truth magic. And more importantly, he told us about the awakening ceremony. The ritual to free the first vampire from his prison, using silverblood sacrifice." The whispers turned into open shouting. Multiple delegates were on their feet, denying the first vampire's existence, accusing Lyra of fabricating evidence, demanding explanations. King Aldrich raised one hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he fixed Lyra with a stare that had intimidated generations of alphas. "The first vampire is sealed, has been for 3,000 years. Even if the seal were weakening, and I'm not conceding that it is, a single ceremony couldn't release him." "Not a single ceremony," Oracle Vera said, stepping forward. "A coordinated ritual performed simultaneously at multiple power nexuses across the supernatural world, one of which," she looked pointedly at Lady Seraphina, "happens to be located directly beneath the Vampire Council's primary temple." Lady Seraphina's composure finally cracked. How did we know? Lyra interrupted. Because your people have been sloppy, attacking a Silverblood on the road to a peace gathering, coordinating with werewolf conspirators who kept written records, using suppression poison that has a very specific magical signature. She pulled out the documents Cade had provided, spreading them across the nearest table. We have evidence of treaty violations, conspiracy to commit murder, and active preparation for species-wide genocide. All signed, dated, and verified. We have testimony from wolves and vampires who were coerced into cooperation through blackmail and threats. You have the ravings of a paranoid wolf who sees conspiracy everywhere, Alpha Marcus Ironwood interrupted, standing from his seat in the werewolf section. The same wolf who built a separatist pack designed to undermine traditional Alpha authority. The same wolf whose grandmother nearly destroyed supernatural society through her tyrannical ambitions. He gestured dramatically toward Lyra. Look at her, glowing with unnatural power, dragging a mate she once rejected through some kind of forced bonding ritual, making wild accusations against respected leaders. She's becoming exactly what Isabella Silverblood was, a tyrant who uses fear and power to get her way. The accusation landed hard. Lyra could feel the mood in the chamber shifting. Delegates who had been listening now, viewing her with suspicion. He's right about one thing, Cade said quietly, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. Lyra is powerful, terrifyingly powerful now that our bond is complete. With her abilities and my strength combined, we could probably dominate every wolf in this chamber if we wanted to. He paused, letting that sink in. The question is, would she? Would we? 6 months ago, I rejected Lyra because I was terrified of exactly this scenario. I convinced myself she would become like her grandmother, that power would corrupt her into tyranny. His voice grew stronger. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong that it took 6 months of watching her build something genuine to understand how wrong. He released Lyra's hand and stepped forward, addressing the assembled leaders directly. Lyra Silverblood has spent 6 months creating a pack of 500 rejected wolves. Outcasts, rogues, wolves that traditional packs threw away. And do you know what she did with them? He pulled out Arya's statistical reports. She built a democratic society with lower violence rates than any traditional pack. She established economic systems that outperform territories, twice her size. She created genuine community where wolves choose to stay, not because they're compelled, but because they actually want to be there. He turned back to face Marcus Ironwood. You want to talk about tyranny? Let's talk about the pack structures that reject wolves for being politically inconvenient. Let's discuss the systems that force wolves to accept mates they don't want, or face exile. Let's examine the traditional authority that maintains power through fear and supernatural coercion. His eyes blazed with conviction. Lyra isn't becoming her grandmother. She's becoming something better. A leader who proves that cooperation and choice are stronger than domination. And that's exactly why you're all so terrified of her. The chamber fell silent. Lyra felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not just the mate bond, but genuine gratitude for Cade standing with her, defending her in front of the most powerful supernatural leaders in the world. Pretty words, Lady Seraphina said coldly. But they don't address the fundamental accusation. You claim the Council of First Blood is preparing to release the first vampire. Even if that were true, and I'm not conceding it is, what exactly do you propose we do about it? We work together, Lyra said simply. Werewolves, vampires, witches, all supernatural species coordinating to reinforce the prison seals before they fail completely. It's what should have been done decades ago, but everyone was too busy fighting over territory and power to notice the real threat. Impossible, Alpha Vincent Shadowmere scoffed. The species can barely coexist during this gathering. You expect us to coordinate complex magical rituals across territories? I expect you to survive, Lyra shot back. Because if the first vampire breaks free and you're all still divided, your territories won't matter. Your power won't matter. Nothing will matter except becoming food for an ancient predator who sees all of us as equally disposable. She speaks truth. High Priestess Morgana said, speaking for the first time. The witch leader's voice carried the weight of prophecy. My seers have seen the prison weakening. We estimated 5 years before catastrophic failure. but recent events have accelerated the timeline. She looked directly at Lady Seraphina. The ritual sacrifices. The power draws from ley lines near the prison. Someone has been deliberately weakening the seals, and we both know who. Lady Seraphina stood slowly, and for the first time, Lyra saw genuine emotion on the vampire leader's face. Not guilt or shame, but cold calculation. Yes, she said simply. I've been working to free the first vampire. Do you want to know why? The chamber held its breath. Because the alternative is worse. Lady Seraphina's voice was ice. The prison isn't just weakening, it's failing. Has been for centuries. We can't reinforce seals that are degrading from the inside out. The first vampire will break free eventually, whether we help him or not. She looked around at the assembled delegates. So I made a choice. Better to control the timing of his release, to negotiate terms, to position ourselves as allies, rather than victims. Better to guide his awakening toward targets we choose than to have him emerge randomly and consume indiscriminately. You plan to feed him other species, King Aldrich said, his voice heavy with disgust. Use werewolves and witches as sacrificial offerings to sate his hunger. I plan to save my people, Lady Seraphina corrected. The same way any leader would. Don't pretend you wouldn't make the same choice if your species faced extinction. There's always a choice, Lyra said quietly. My grandmother faced impossible odds and chose tyranny. You face a catastrophic threat and choose betrayal. But there's a third option you're all ignoring. Which is? High Priestess Morgana asked. We fix the prison properly. Lyra moved to the center of the chamber, Cade following at her side. The seal isn't failing because of age. It's failing because it was never designed to hold something that powerful indefinitely. It was a temporary solution that lasted 3,000 years longer than intended. She felt Oracle Vera's knowledge flowing through the completed mate bond, Cade's tactical thinking merging with her strategic vision. But there's another way to seal the first vampire. Permanently. It requires combined power from multiple species, channeled through a focus point strong enough to contain and redirect that much energy. You're talking about a convergence, High Priestess Morgana breathed. But those haven't been successfully performed in over a millennium. The coordination required, the trust necessary between species, is exactly what this gathering is supposed to represent, Lyra finished. We're all here. Werewolves, vampires, witches, every major species represented in one location. If we can't achieve cooperation now, in the face of mutual extinction, then we deserve what's coming. And this focus point? Lady Seraphina asked skeptically. What could possibly contain the combined magical output of multiple species while simultaneously reinforcing a prison that's held an ancient vampire for millennia? Lyra felt the answer through her bond with Cade, through Oracle Vera's ancient knowledge, through the prophecy that had been hovering over her since birth. A completed silverblood mate bond, she said quietly. My grandmother was powerful, but she never achieved a genuine bond with an equal partner. She tried to channel everything through herself alone, and it wasn't enough. But two alphas, perfectly bonded, with combined access to silverblood abilities and traditional pack magic, could serve as the conduit for a convergence powerful enough to seal the first vampire permanently. Oracle Vera finished. It's dangerous. The energy flow could kill both of them. But it's possible. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates saw the logic but doubted the execution. Others refused to even consider cooperating with species they'd been taught to hate. Alpha Marcus was shouting about silverblood manipulation. Lady Seraphina was calculating odds with cold vampire pragmatism. And through it all, Lyra stood with Cade at her side, feeling their completed bond thrumming with possibility. I'm not asking you to trust me because of my bloodline, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. I'm asking you to trust the evidence. We've brought proof of the conspiracy. We've explained the threat. We've offered a solution that doesn't require anyone to sacrifice their people or surrender their autonomy. She looked around at faces from a dozen different species. My grandmother tried to unite supernatural society through force, and created only resentment. The first vampire cult is trying to divide us through fear and manipulation. I'm offering a third option, voluntary cooperation for mutual survival. It's not perfect. It's not guaranteed. but it's better than tyranny or extinction. And if we refuse? Alpha Vincent asked. Then you prove that supernatural society deserves to fall apart, Lyra said bluntly. And when the first vampire breaks free and starts consuming everyone indiscriminately, at least you'll die knowing you were too proud to accept help from a wolf you considered beneath you. The brutal honesty seemed to shock the chamber into silence. King Aldrich stood slowly, his ancient eyes moving from Lyra to the assembled delegates. A vote, he said finally, on whether to attempt the convergence ritual, all in favor of coordinated action to reinforce the first vampire's prison, knowing it requires unprecedented cooperation between species. The silence stretched. Then High Priestess Morgana stood. The witch coven's vote in favor. More silence. Then a vampire in Lady Seraphina's delegation stood. Not the leader herself, but one of her council members. The Northern Vampire Clan's vote in favor. We did not join the Council of First Blood, and we have no interest in becoming sacrifices to an ancient monster. One by one, delegates began standing. Not all of them. Alpha Marcus remained firmly seated, along with several vampire factions loyal to Lady Seraphina. But enough, more than half the chamber, representing more than half the supernatural world's power. Finally, Lady Seraphina herself stood. The Central Vampire Council abstains, she said coldly. But we will not interfere with those who wish to attempt this ritual. Consider it professional courtesy. It wasn't support, but it wasn't opposition either. It would have to be enough. Then we have consensus, King Aldrich declared. The convergence ritual will be attempted. Alpha Silverblood, you and Alpha Blackthorn will serve as the primary focus. High Priestess Morgana will coordinate the magical components. And may the Moon Goddess have mercy on us all if this fails. As the gathering dissolved into planning committees and strategic discussions, Lyra felt Cade's hand find hers again. Still think cooperation is possible? He asked quietly. We just convinced mortal enemies to work together to prevent an apocalypse, she replied. I'd call that possible enough. Now we just have to survive channeling enough power to seal an ancient vampire deity, while our bodies try not to explode from the strain. Details, Lyra said with a tired smile. We'll figure it out. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of what they'd just agreed to. The convergence ritual would require them to serve as a conduit for power that could reshape reality itself. One mistake, one moment of lost concentration, and they'd be obliterated, along with everyone trying to help them. No pressure at all. Chapter 9. The Final Battle. The convergence ritual would take place at dawn in the Chamber of Binding, a vast underground space beneath the crossroads, where ancient magic had been worked for millennia. The ceiling was open to the sky, allowing moonlight and sunlight to reach the ritual circle carved into the living stone. Lyra stood at the edge of that circle, 4 hours before dawn, studying the intricate patterns that would either save the supernatural world or kill everyone involved in trying. Second thoughts? Oracle Vera asked, materializing from the shadows with her usual unsettling grace. 100 thoughts at least, Lyra admitted. Tell me honestly, what are our actual odds of surviving this? The ancient shaman was quiet for a long moment. If everything goes perfectly, 70%. If there are complications, and there are always complications, perhaps 40%. If someone actively tries to sabotage the ritual, she shrugged eloquently. So we're probably going to die. Probably, Oracle Vera agreed with brutal honesty. But you'll die, trying to save millions of supernatural beings from an apocalyptic threat. There are worse ways to go. Comforting, Lyra muttered. Footsteps echoed in the chamber as more participants arrived. High Priestess Morgana led a group of 12 witches, each one a master of a different magical discipline. They began setting up spell components around the ritual circle, crystals and herbs, bones and blood, items of power that hummed with contained energy. King Aldrich arrived with a contingent of alphas, including some who had opposed Lyra at the gathering, but had agreed to help anyway. Even Alpha Marcus Ironwood was there, his face carefully neutral as he took his assigned position. Never thought I'd see the day, Commander Hayes murmured from his position near Lyra. Wolves who've hated each other for decades, standing together in a ritual circle. Wait until the vampires arrive, Arya said. That's when things get really awkward. As if summoned by her words, vampires began filing into the chamber, not Lady Seraphina's faction. They'd made clear they wouldn't participate directly, but representatives from clans across the territory, young vampires and ancient ones, nobles and commoners, all united by the desire to not be consumed by their progenitor. The vampire prisoner they'd captured was there too, freed from his chains and granted provisional amnesty in exchange for his cooperation. He stood slightly apart from the others, not quite trusted by anyone but no longer actively opposing them. That's everyone except the linchpin, High Priestess Morgana announced, checking her magical calculations. Where is Alpha Blackthorn? Here, Cade said, emerging from a side passage. He looked exhausted. They'd spent the past 4 hours being prepared for the ritual, their bodies marked with protective runes, and their minds fortified with mental shielding. Sorry, Oracle Vera's preparations were thorough. They need to be, the ancient shaman replied. You two are going to be channeling power that could level mountains. If your minds or bodies fail at the wrong moment, you won't just die. You'll take everyone in a 100-mile radius with you. Again, so comforting, Lyra said. Cade moved to stand beside her, and immediately the mate bond settled into something more stable. They'd been apart for less than 20 minutes, but already the separation had felt wrong. The completed bond didn't just connect them, it made them more functional together than apart. Ready? He asked quietly. No, she admitted. But we're doing it anyway. High Priestess Morgana called for attention, her voice magically amplified to reach every participant. The convergence ritual requires perfect synchronization between all participants. Werewolves will channel raw power through pack bonds. Vampires will contribute blood magic and death energy. Witches will weave everything together and direct it toward the focus point. Alpha's silver blood and blackthorn. She looked at Lyra and Cade directly. You two will take that combined energy and use your mate bond to channel it toward the first vampire's prison. The bond acts as both filter and amplifier, refining raw magical power into something precise enough to reinforce ancient seals. If you succeed, the prison will be permanently strengthened, capable of holding for another 10,000 years. And if we fail? Someone asked. If the prison seals fail before we finish, the first vampire awakens, and everyone dies. If the ritual collapses mid-casting, the power backflow kills everyone in this chamber. If the focus pair loses concentration, or their bond fractures under strain, they explode and take half the continent with them. Morgana's voice was clinical. Any other questions? Silence. Excellent. Everyone take your positions. We begin when the moon reaches its apex, approximately 20 minutes from now. The next 20 minutes passed, intense preparation. Wolves formed concentric circles around the ritual space, pack bonds interweaving in complex patterns. Vampires positioned themselves at cardinal points, their blood magic creating geometric shapes of power. Witches moved through it all, adjusting and fine-tuning until the entire chamber thrummed with barely contained energy. Lyra and Cade stood at the exact center, hands clasped, trying not to think about the fact that they were about to become a conduit for power that could unmake reality. I need to tell you something, Cade said quietly as the final minutes ticked away, in case we don't survive this. Don't, Lyra said. Don't do the dramatic last words thing. We're going to make it. I know, but just in case. He squeezed her hands. 6 months ago, I was the worst version of myself, broken, scared, hurting everyone around me because I was too damaged to accept genuine connection. You could have destroyed me for that, could have used your power to crush me into nothing, and everyone would have said I deserved it. His voice grew rough with emotion. Instead, you built something better. Showed me what real strength looks like, gave me a reason to want to be worthy of you. He met her eyes. So thank you, for not giving up on the possibility that even broken wolves can choose to change. Lyra felt tears burning in her eyes. You're not broken, Cade. You were never broken. You were just taught that vulnerability was weakness, and it took time to unlearn that. But you did the work. You became someone I could trust with my life." She smiled despite her fear. "Besides, you can't get rid of me now. We're permanently bonded. If I'm going to be stuck with you for eternity, you'd better survive this ritual so I can make you properly miserable." Cade laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension, looking forward to it. "Positions," High Priestess Morgana called. "The moon reaches apex in 30 seconds. Everyone focus on your assigned tasks. Do not break concentration for any reason. If you feel the power becoming overwhelming, channel it to your nearest neighbor rather than letting it consume you. We're all connected. What affects one, affects all." The chamber fell silent, except for rhythmic chanting from the witch circle, ancient words in languages that predated human civilization, calling on powers that most modern supernaturals had forgotten existed. 20 seconds, Morgana announced. Lyra felt pack bonds activating around her. Every werewolf in the chamber was now connected through an intricate web of power, with her and Cade at the center. The weight of it was staggering, hundreds of wolves offering their strength willingly, trusting her to use it wisely. 10 seconds. The vampire blood magic ignited, crimson light painting the chamber in shades of violence and death. But it wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, directed, flowing in precise patterns that the witches had designed. 5 seconds. Oracle Vera's voice cut through the chanting. "Remember, trust each other. Trust the bond. Trust that two broken wolves choosing to work together are stronger than any single tyrant trying to dominate alone." 3, 2, 1. Begin. The ritual hit like a tidal wave of liquid fire. Power slammed into Lyra from every direction simultaneously. Pack bonds channeling raw werewolf strength. Vampire magic carrying the essence of death and blood. Witchcraft weaving it all into patterns of sublime complexity. It poured into her and through her, seeking the mate bond connection to Cade. She felt him receiving the same overwhelming flood, felt their combined bond struggling to process and channel power that no two wolves should ever possess. The pain was immediate and absolute, not physical pain, but spiritual agony, as their very souls were stretched to contain forces meant to be spread across entire species. "Hold," High Priestess Morgana commanded. "We're establishing the base connection. Once stable, we redirect toward the prison." Stable. The word was laughable. Lyra felt like she was drowning in an ocean of power, while simultaneously being burned alive. The only thing keeping her anchored was Cade's presence through the bond, his strength merging with hers until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Images flashed through their shared consciousness. The first vampire's prison, deep beneath the earth, ancient seals cracking in bleeding power. They could see him through the ritual's magical sight, a darkness so absolute it made normal darkness look bright by comparison. Hunger given form, destruction made manifest, a being that had existed before civilization and would exist long after if they failed here. "Channel now," Morgana's voice cracked like a whip. The witches redirected the power flow, and suddenly, instead of drowning in it, Lyra and Cade became the funnel through which it poured. Raw supernatural energy flowing through their mate bond, refined by their combined will, directed toward the failing prison seals with surgical precision. For one brilliant moment, it was working. The seals began to reinforce, ancient magic responding to the influx of power, the cracks sealed, the darkness contained. Victory seemed possible. Then the sabotage hit. Someone in the ritual circle had been planted, not to openly attack, but to introduce subtle flaws into the power flow, disruptions too small to notice individually, but accumulating into critical instability. The ritual began to collapse. "We're losing containment," one of the witches shouted. "The power matrix is fragmenting." "Hold formation," Morgana commanded. "If we lose cohesion now, the backflow will kill everyone." But it was too late. The carefully woven patterns of power were unraveling. Wolves began screaming as pack bonds fractured under strain. Vampires staggered as their blood magic turned against them. The chamber itself started shaking, ancient stones cracking under the weight of barely controlled energy. Through the chaos, Lyra felt something else, a presence pushing against her consciousness through the ritual connection. Not the first vampire himself, but something almost as terrifying. Lady Seraphina. The vampire leader wasn't in the chamber physically, but she'd somehow connected herself to the ritual through one of her loyalist delegates. And now she was actively trying to steer the convergence not toward reinforcing the prison, but toward shattering it completely. If I can't control the first vampire's release, her thought echoed through the magical connection, then I'll ensure it happens on terms that give my faction the best chance of survival. Let him emerge while you're all exhausted from the ritual. Let him consume the other species first, while vampires retreat to safe territories. No, Lyra gasped, fighting against the vampire leader's manipulation, while simultaneously trying to keep the ritual from exploding. You'll doom everyone, including your own people. Better a chance of survival through strategic retreat than certain death through failed cooperation, Seraphina replied coldly. The ritual circle was in chaos now. Multiple participants had collapsed. The power flow was becoming actively dangerous, spiraling out of control as Seraphina's interference corrupted the carefully designed patterns. Lyra felt herself losing the battle. Her poisoned abilities were still compromised, and even Cade's strength combined with hers wasn't enough to fight a vampire elder, actively sabotaging the ritual, while simultaneously maintaining the convergence. They were going to fail. The ritual would collapse, the power would backflow and kill everyone, and the first vampire would emerge into a supernatural world too fractured and weakened to resist him. Unless, through their bond, Lyra felt Cade reach the same conclusion she had. There was one option left, one desperate, probably fatal gambit that might work if they were willing to pay the ultimate price. They could absorb the failing ritual's power themselves. Instead of trying to channel it toward the prison, they could take all that uncontrolled energy into their bond and use it to perform the seal directly. No intermediaries, no complex pattern weaving, just two alphas and enough power to reshape reality, trusting their completed mate bond to keep them alive long enough to finish the work. It would almost certainly kill them. The human body, as even a supernatural one, wasn't designed to contain that much power, but it might work long enough to permanently seal the first vampire before they burned out. Do it, Cade thought to her, through their bond. It'll kill us, Lyra thought back. I know, but everyone else lives. The supernatural world survives, and we go out doing something that actually matters. His mental voice was calm, accepting. Besides, I promised I'd never reject you again. Can't think of a stronger way to prove that than dying together while saving the world. Despite everything, Lyra almost laughed. Trust Cade to make a grand romantic gesture out of mutual suicide. On 3, she thought. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They stopped fighting the collapsing ritual and opened themselves to it completely. Every fragment of uncontrolled power, every piece of broken pattern, every ounce of chaotic energy. They pulled it all into their mate bond with suicidal determination. The pain was indescribable. Lyra felt her body trying to tear itself apart at the cellular level, felt Cade experiencing the same agony, felt their bond straining under weight it was never meant to carry. But underneath the pain was something else. Absolute clarity of purpose, perfect synchronization, the kind of unity that only came from two souls choosing each other, despite every reason not to. They focused everything they had, everything they were, on the first vampire's prison, not trying to channel power through complex patterns, but simply forcing raw magical energy against failing seals through sheer determination and will. The prison responded. Ancient magic that had been degrading for centuries suddenly snapped back into full strength. Seals that had been cracking reinforced and multiplied. The darkness that was the first vampire found itself being pressed backward, deeper into containment, wrapped in layers of supernatural force that would take another 10,000 years to erode. In the ritual chamber, participants stared in awe as two alphas blazed with power bright enough to make looking directly at them painful. Their mate bond had become visible, a spiral of silver and gold light connecting them, channeling more energy than should be possible for any two beings to contain. But it was working. The ritual stabilized. The first vampire's prison sealed completely. The immediate threat was over. And Lyra and Cade were dying. They could both feel it, their bodies giving out, unable to sustain the power flow any longer. They'd accomplished the impossible, but the cost was going to be their lives. Worth it, Cade thought to her, as his consciousness started to fade. Yeah, Lyra agreed, feeling her own awareness dimming. But as they began to slip into darkness, something unexpected happened. The participants of the ritual, every werewolf, vampire, and witch, who had been part of the convergence, all simultaneously reached the same decision. They'd come together to prevent an apocalypse. They weren't going to let the two wolves who'd saved them die, if there was any alternative. Pack bonds that had been disrupted reformed, but this time not just between werewolves. Vampires opened their blood magic connections willingly. Witches wove healing spells through the existing ritual framework. Species that had spent millennia learning to hate each other now cooperated with desperate precision to save two alphas who had proven that cooperation was possible. The power flow reversed. Instead of taking energy from the participants, Lyra and Cade received it, not chaotic and overwhelming, but controlled and healing. Life force and magical strength flowing back into bodies that had given everything to save others. It still might not be enough. They'd burned through too much, damaged themselves too severely, but at least they wouldn't die alone, forgotten martyrs, to a cause no one appreciated. They'd die knowing that supernatural society had finally learned to work together. Except they didn't die. The combined healing magic of multiple species proved stronger than the injuries sustained from channeling apocalyptic power. Slowly, impossibly, two dying alphas stabilized. Their hearts kept beating. Their consciousness remained intact. Their mate bond, stretched to breaking, held firm and began to heal. When Lyra finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Cade's face, equally shocked to still be alive. The second thing she saw was the entire ritual chamber standing in silence, looking at them with expressions ranging from awe to fear to hope. "Well," Oracle Vera said into the quiet, her ancient voice carrying unmistakable satisfaction. That was dramatic. Chapter 10. The New World Order. Lyra woke, 3 days later, in a room she didn't recognize. The ceiling was carved stone, covered in glowing runes that pulsed gently with healing magic. Soft light filtered through windows that looked out over mountains she'd never seen before, and beside her bed, slumped in a chair with his hand still holding hers, was Cade. He looked terrible, exhausted, unshaven, his clothes rumpled like he'd been wearing them for days, but he was alive. They were both alive. "You're awake," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Lyra turned her head carefully. Her body felt fragile, like it had been broken and imperfectly reassembled, to see Oracle Vera standing there, with an expression that might have been relief. "How long?" Lyra's voice came out as a croak. 3 days since the ritual. You and Alpha Blackthorn have been unconscious for most of that, occasionally waking to scream from nightmares about channeling power that should have killed you. Oracle Vera moved into the room, checking the healing runes with practiced efficiency. The supernatural medical community has been fascinated. Apparently, you two have rewritten what we thought was possible in terms of power channeling and mate bond strength. Did it work? Lyra asked. The prison? See for yourself. Oracle Vera helped Lyra sit up and guided her to the window. In the distance, visible even from miles away, was a mountain that seemed to pulse with contained darkness. But it wasn't the chaotic, leaking darkness from before the ritual. This was controlled, sealed, wrapped in layers of visible magical protection that sparkled in the sunlight. The first vampire's prison, Oracle Vera explained, reinforced beyond anything achieved in recorded history. Every supernatural species with magical capability contributed to the final sealing after you two stabilized the foundation. It's beautiful in a terrifying sort of way. And the political situation? Lyra asked, already dreading the answer. Complicated, Oracle Vera admitted, but not hopeless. Come, there's a council waiting to speak with you once you're ready. They've been remarkably patient, considering you're technically the most powerful supernatural being currently conscious. What about Cade? Will wake when his body finishes healing. He channeled slightly less power than you, but he also started with fewer supernatural advantages. It's remarkable he survived at all. Oracle Vera's expression softened. The mate bond kept you both alive. The medical consensus is that separately, you would have burned out in seconds. Together you lasted long enough for help to arrive. Lyra looked back at Cade, still sleeping peacefully despite the chaos of the past days. Let him rest, she decided. I'll handle the council meeting. Are you sure? You're barely healed yourself. I'm sure. Besides, Lyra smiled despite her exhaustion. I've faced down vampire conspirators and ancient apocalyptic threats. How bad can a political council be? The council chamber was smaller than the grand hall where the gathering had taken place, designed for actual negotiation rather than theatrical posturing. Around an oval table sat representatives from every major supernatural faction: werewolves, vampires, witches, and several species Lyra hadn't encountered before. King Aldrich presided at the head of the table, his ancient eyes sharp despite his visible fatigue. High Priestess Morgana sat to his right, looking serene as always, and to his left, in a chair that had presumably been empty until recently, sat a vampire Lyra had never seen before. Alpha Silverblood, King Aldrich greeted her formally. May I present Lord Cassius Darkwater, newly appointed head of the Central Vampire Council. Liver raised an eyebrow. What happened to Lady Seraphina? Currently imprisoned for sabotage, conspiracy, and attempted genocide, Lord Cassius said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. When evidence of her interference with the ritual became public, combined with documentation of her coordination with the first vampire cult, even her most loyal supporters couldn't defend her actions. He smiled, showing fangs. Vampire politics are remarkably efficient when survival is at stake. She was deposed within hours of the ritual's conclusion. Please, sit. King Aldrich gestured to an empty chair. We have much to discuss. Lyra sat carefully, very aware that she was probably the youngest and least politically experienced person in the room. But she was also the one who had just channeled enough power to seal an ancient vampire, and survived, which apparently gave her significant credibility. First, King Aldrich said, on behalf of the werewolf community, thank you. What you and Alpha Blackthorn accomplished saved countless lives across all species. The supernatural world owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. The witch covens concur, High Priestess Morgana added. Your sacrifice demonstrated that cooperation between species isn't just idealistic rhetoric. It's practical necessity. The vampire clans are grateful, Lord Cassius said, choosing his words carefully, though we're also somewhat terrified of what your power levels mean for the existing balance of supernatural authority. And there it was, the real issue underlying all the polite gratitude. You're worried I'm going to become my grandmother, Lyra said bluntly. The silence that followed confirmed her suspicion. Your abilities are unprecedented, King Aldrich said carefully. The combination of Silverblood heritage, completed mate bond with another alpha, and the power channeling you accomplished during the ritual. Our best estimates suggest you could command every werewolf in this hemisphere if you chose to, possibly every supernatural being with sufficient magical essence, which makes you functionally a goddess, Lord Cassius added, and history suggests that beings with godlike power rarely use it benevolently. Lyra felt anger flare, but she suppressed it. They weren't wrong to be concerned. Her grandmother had possessed similar power, and used it to try dominating everyone. The parallels were obvious and terrifying. I don't want to rule you, she said quietly. Any of you. The Borderlands Pact exists because traditional power structures were failing wolves who needed something better, but I never intended to expand beyond providing sanctuary for those who needed it. And yet your influence is expanding whether you intend it or not, High Priestess Morgana said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. In the 3 days since the ritual, 17 werewolf packs have formally requested to restructure their governance, using the Borderlands democratic model. 43 rejected wolves have applied for sanctuary in your territory, and at least 5 alpha leaders have indicated they would willingly submit to your authority if you chose to claim it. Because they saw what we accomplished together, Lyra replied. Not domination, cooperation. Multiple species working in harmony toward a common goal. That's the model I want to expand, not some tyrannical empire. Pretty words, Lord Cassius said. But how do we know you'll maintain that philosophy as your power grows? How do we trust that you won't eventually decide that forced cooperation is more efficient than voluntary participation? It was the question at the heart of everything. How do you prove you won't become a tyrant when you have the power to become one easily? You don't, Lyra admitted. You can't know what I'll do a decade from now, or a century from now. Power does corrupt, and I'm not arrogant enough to think I'm immune to that. She leaned forward, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. But here's what I can offer. Every decision I make regarding supernatural policy, I submit to review by a multi-species council. Every expansion of the Borderlands model, I coordinate with existing territorial authorities. Every use of Silverblood abilities beyond basic pack management, I document and justify publicly. Accountability, High Priestess Morgana said thoughtfully. You're proposing voluntary limitation on your own power. I'm proposing the same thing I've built in my own territory, governance through consent and cooperation, rather than domination. Yes, I could force my will on everyone, but my grandmother proved that forced obedience creates resentment and rebellion. Voluntary cooperation is harder, slower, messier, and infinitely more stable. And if we refuse your offer? King Aldrich asked. If we decide the risk of another Isabella Silverblood is too great and move to suppress your abilities? The threat hung in the air. Lyra felt the mate bond stir as Cade's consciousness brushed against hers from wherever he was resting, aware of the danger even in sleep, ready to stand with her if needed. Then you prove you've learned nothing, Lyra said quietly. My grandmother was created by alphas, who saw her as a threat, and tried to eliminate her. That attempt at suppression just made her more paranoid and aggressive. If you come after me now, you'll create exactly the tyrant you're afraid of. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the sealed prison mountain. I don't want to rule you. I don't want to dominate or control or force anyone to follow me. I want to build a supernatural society where rejected wolves don't need sanctuaries because they're valued in their home packs, where species cooperate because they recognize mutual benefit, not because they're compelled, where power comes from trust and choice rather than fear and domination. She turned back to face the council. Give me the chance to prove that's possible. Let me expand the Borderlands model gradually, with oversight and accountability. Let me demonstrate that Silverblood power can be used for building rather than destroying. And if I start showing signs of becoming my grandmother, if I start using compulsion where I should be earning trust, then you'll have plenty of warning to intervene. The council members exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, King Aldrich spoke. We have a counter-proposal. The Borderlands Pack maintains its autonomy and continues its governance model. You are granted authority to offer sanctuary to any rejected wolf who seeks it, regardless of their pack of origin. And in exchange, you serve on a newly formed supernatural council as the werewolf representative for progressive reform. Meaning? Lyra asked cautiously. Meaning you get a formal voice in multi-species policy decisions, High Priestess Morgana explained. But so do representatives from traditional werewolf packs, vampire clans, witch covens, and other supernatural communities. Your power is balanced by other voices, and all major decisions require consensus. It's not perfect, Lord Cassius admitted. You'll be frustrated by how slowly consensus builds. You'll want to simply command solutions into existence, but it prevents any single faction, including yours, from dominating the others. Lyra considered the offer. It wasn't what she'd been fighting for, but it wasn't tyranny or suppression either. It was compromise, the messy, imperfect reality of actually building cooperation between different groups with different interests. I accept, she said, on one additional condition, which is, rejected wolves from all species, not just werewolves, are granted the same sanctuary rights. If a vampire is cast out for political inconvenience, if a witch is exiled for questioning coven authority, they can seek refuge in the borderlands just like rejected werewolves. The council members looked shocked. Multi-species integration went far beyond what anyone had proposed. That's unprecedented, King Aldrich said slowly. So was a convergence ritual, Lyra countered. So was multiple species cooperating to seal an ancient threat. We just proved that unprecedented things are possible when we're willing to try. I'm asking you to try one more unprecedented thing, treating all rejected beings with the same compassion, regardless of their species. Another round of silent communication between council members. Provisionally agreed, High Priestess Morgana said finally, with the understanding that each case will be evaluated individually, and other species have the right to request extradition for genuine criminals. Fair enough, Lyra agreed. Then we have terms, King Aldrich declared. Alpha Silverblood maintains her territory and governance model. The Supernatural Council is formed with representatives from all major factions. Multi-species sanctuary is granted with appropriate oversight, and we all hope desperately that this experiment in cooperation doesn't explode in our faces. Despite the tension, several council members smiled. There's one more matter, Lord Cassius said. Marcus Sterling's sister. She was indeed being held as leverage, and she provided valuable intelligence about vampire cult operations. She's requested asylum in your territory. Granted, Lyra said immediately. And Marcus himself has asked to remain with your pack despite his role as a planted spy. That was more complicated. Marcus had betrayed them, fed information to enemies, contributed to plans that could have gotten them all killed, but he'd also been coerced through threats to his sister, and he'd ultimately chosen to help them when given the chance. Also granted, Lyra decided, on probation with supervision, but everyone deserves a chance at redemption if they're willing to work for it. The council meeting continued for another hour, hammering out details of the new political structure. When it finally adjourned, Lyra felt exhausted, but cautiously optimistic. They hadn't solved everything. There would be conflicts and setbacks, and moments when cooperation seemed impossible. But they'd taken the first steps towards something better. She found Kate awake when she returned to their room, sitting up in bed and looking significantly more alert than before. You handled the council without me, he said, not quite making it a question. Seemed like a good opportunity to practice diplomacy while you were unconscious. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed. We're now official representatives on a multi-species supernatural council. Congratulations on your new political career. Kate groaned. I hate politics. Too bad. You're permanently bonded to a wolf who just agreed to participate in supernatural governance. You're stuck with politics whether you like it or not. There are worse things to be stuck with, Kate said, pulling her closer. We saved the world, didn't we? Actually saved it. Sealed an ancient vampire, prevented an apocalypse, convinced enemies to cooperate. We did, Lyra agreed. We also nearly died doing it, multiple times. But we didn't die. We survived. Together. He rested his forehead against hers. 6 months ago, I rejected you because I was terrified of needing anyone. Now I can't imagine existing without you. Funny how things work out. Hilarious, Lyra said dryly, but she was smiling. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, processing everything that had happened. The journey from rejection to redemption, the transformation from enemies to mates, the impossible task they'd accomplished through trust and cooperation. What happens now? Kate asked finally. Now we go home, Lyra said. Back to the borderlands. Back to building the kind of pack society where wolves like us aren't seen as threats, but as proof that change is possible. And the Supernatural Council? We'll figure it out, make compromises, frustrate ourselves with slow progress, occasionally want to just command everyone to cooperate, and have to resist the impulse. She squeezed his hand. But we'll do it together, just like everything else. Together, Cade agreed. I like the sound of that. Epilogue, 1 year later. The borderlands had expanded into something that barely resembled the struggling refugee camp from a year ago. Lyra stood on the observation deck of her tower, now officially called the council building, because she'd finally convinced everyone to stop using royalty-adjacent titles. 700 wolves called this home now, along with 36 vampires, 12 witches, and a handful of other supernatural beings who'd sought sanctuary from traditional power structures. The democratic councils were functioning smoothly, with only occasional disputes that required alpha mediation. The economy was thriving, with the borderlands serving as a neutral trade hub for multiple species. And most importantly, rejected wolves from across the supernatural world were discovering that being cast out wasn't the end of their story. You're brooding again, Arya said, appearing beside her with the casualness of someone who'd become pack's second in command. What is it this time? Worried about the Supernatural Council meeting next week? Concerned about the expansion requests? Anxious about— I'm pregnant, Lyra said quietly. Arya's jaw dropped. You're— what? Pregnant? About 8 weeks. Oracle Vera confirmed it yesterday. Lyra turned to face her friend. Cade and I are going to have a child. A silver blood child, with combined bloodlines from 2 alpha parents, and whatever additional powers come from our completed bond. That's incredible. Arya's shock transformed into genuine joy. Congratulations. Have you told Cade yet? Not yet. I wanted to process it myself first. Lyra's hand moved unconsciously to her still flat stomach. My grandmother's quest for power killed her. The prophecy suggested I'd stand at a crossroads determining the supernatural world's fate. And now I'm bringing a child into all of this complexity. A child who'll grow up in a world where cooperation is possible, Arya corrected gently, where species work together instead of tearing each other apart, where rejected wolves have sanctuaries and traditional power structures are learning to adapt. You and Cade built that world. Lyra, your child gets to inherit it. It was a good point. Lyra thought about everything that had changed in just 1 year. The Supernatural Council, imperfect and frustrating as it was, had prevented 3 major conflicts through diplomatic intervention. The Borderlands model had been adopted by 19 other packs across multiple territories, and most importantly, rejected wolves weren't automatically assumed to be worthless anymore. I'm terrified, Lyra admitted. What if I mess this up? What if I become so focused on being a good parent that I neglect my pack? Or so focused on my pack that I neglect my child? What if you stop catastrophizing and recognize that you've got an entire pack ready to help raise this child? Arya interrupted. You're not doing this alone, Lyra. You've got Cade. You've got me. You've got 500 wolves who would die for you. Your child is going to have more aunts and uncles and mentors than any wolf in history. Lyra felt something warm settle in her chest. Arya was right. She wasn't alone. She'd never been alone. Not really. She just needed to learn to accept help instead of trying to carry everything herself. I should tell Cade, she said. You should, Arya agreed. He's in the training grounds, teaching combat tactics to the new recruits. Go surprise him with the news that he's going to be a father. Lyra found Cade exactly where Arya said he'd be, demonstrating defensive formations to a group of young wolves who watched him with reverent attention. He'd grown into his role as the Borderlands combat instructor, teaching wolves to fight not for domination, but for protection of their community. He looked happy, genuinely, unself-consciously happy in a way she'd never seen before their bond completed. She waited until the training session ended, then pulled him aside to a quiet corner of the grounds. We need to talk, she said. Cade's expression immediately shifted to concern. What's wrong? Is it the Supernatural Council? The expansion requests? Did something happen? I'm pregnant, Lyra said, deciding there was no point in drawing it out. Cade froze. You're what? Pregnant. With our child. A little wolf who's going to have silver blood abilities and 2 alpha parents, and probably cause us endless amounts of worry and joy. She took his hand and placed it over her stomach. We're going to be parents, Cade. In about 7 months, we're responsible for a tiny wolf who didn't ask to be born into all this complexity. For a long moment, Cade just stared at her. Then his face split into the brightest smile she'd ever seen. We're having a child, he said, his voice filled with wonder. An actual child. Our child. He pulled her into a hug so tight it almost hurt, and Lyra felt through their bond the overwhelming rush of his emotions. Joy and terror, and love and excitement, all mixed together into something that made her own eyes water. We're going to mess this up, she warned him. We're going to make mistakes and worry constantly, and probably overprotect them terribly. Absolutely, Cade agreed. We're going to be those parents who hover and fret and drive our child crazy with how much we care, and it's going to be perfect. He pulled back enough to look at her face. A year ago, I was a broken alpha who couldn't accept love without destroying it. Now I'm mated to the most incredible wolf in the world, helping build a society that's actually worth living in, and about to become a father. His voice grew thick with emotion. I don't deserve any of this, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of it. You already are, Lyra said softly. You chose to change, to grow, to be better than what you were taught. That's what makes you worthy. Not perfection, but the willingness to keep trying even when it's hard. They stood together in the training grounds, holding each other while the borderlands bustled with activity around them. Wolves training, councils meeting, species cooperating, rejected members finding purpose and belonging. Everything Isabella Silverblood had tried to build through force and domination, Lyra had achieved through trust and choice. And now she was bringing a child into a world where that approach had proven successful. We should tell Oracle Vera, Cade said finally. She'll want to start preparing magical protections, and probably lecture us about proper prenatal care for supernaturally powerful offspring. She'll also cry, Lyra said. I've never seen her cry, but I bet she does when we tell her. They were right on both counts. Oracle Vera cried, lectured, and immediately began preparing enough protective charms to wrap a small army in safety. The news spread through the pack by evening, and the celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Standing on her tower balcony later, watching her pack celebrate the promise of new life, Lyra felt the weight of prophecy finally lift from her shoulders. She'd stood at the crossroads and made her choice, not between love and duty, but recognizing they could be the same thing. Not between power and cooperation, but understanding that true power came from choosing cooperation, even when domination was easier. Her grandmother had tried to save the supernatural world, and failed because she couldn't trust anyone but herself. Lyra had succeeded because she'd learned to trust others, to accept help, to build something together that no single wolf could achieve alone. And now she was passing that lesson to the next generation. No pressure, little one, she whispered to the child growing inside her. But you're going to inherit a world where cooperation is possible, where rejected wolves have value, where species work together instead of tearing each other apart. Try not to mess it up too badly. Through the mate bond, she felt Cade's amusement at her words. They'll be fine, he thought to her. They'll have us to guide them, and an entire pack of wolves who've proven that choosing to change is always possible. Yeah, Lyra agreed, watching the celebration continue below. They'll be fine. We'll all be fine. And for the first time in her life, she actually believed it.
And that's Lyra's complete journey from rejected outcast to alpha queen, from broken to whole, proving that mercy can be stronger than revenge. Now, I know what you're thinking, but what about Luna's prophecy? What was Cade really feeling during all this? What happens next? Great questions. Like I said earlier, I actually wrote 5 exclusive bonus chapters exploring exactly that: Cade's tormented thoughts during the rejection, Elena's perspective when she signed those papers, Oracle Vera's hidden history with Lyra's grandmother, Lyra and Cade's vulnerable first night as mates, and a detailed look at their life 5 years later. If you want those deeper dives into the story, the complete ebook with all the bonus content is linked in the description. But whether you read the bonus chapters or just enjoyed the story here, thank you for investing hours of your life in Lyra's world. Thank you for caring about these characters. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Remember, rejection isn't the end of your story, it's just the beginning of discovering who you truly are. See you in the next one.